Okay, I think we're live on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn, hopefully. Welcome to the show, everyone. So this is RetireJapan TV, and we talk about personal finance and investing and retirement and living in Japan. And today we're going to be talking about a very important aspect of living in Japan, and that is education. So I'm super excited to welcome Shaney to the show. I've known Shaney for ages, actually, for years now. And it's going to be really good to get some of her expertise on this topic. And I think we're going to have lots of questions from the audience as well. So welcome, Shaney. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ben. Lovely to be here.
We're actually coming at you from 3 continents today.
Yeah.
3 different countries. I'm in Germany. And it's a very pleasant 1 p.m. here in Germany. And Daniel's holding down the fort in Japan. And Shaney, you're in Canada.
That's right. It's 7 a.m. for me here.
Thank you for your sacrifice today.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So obviously, could you tell us a little bit about your background, I guess?
Sure.
And then people will understand why we've been excited to invite you on.
Right. So I am from Canada originally. I'm back here in Canada just due to a family emergency, rather unfortunately, but things are looking good in that department. So I'm happy to be here today. I originally came to Japan in 1995 as a JET assistant language teacher in Fukushima Prefecture in a very, very small town. And I stayed there. I did that for a couple of years, and then I became an independent counselor for international relations at a local international association in Fukushima, and I did that for 3 years. And then I decided to go back to Canada because I'd been in Japan for 5 years, and I thought, I need to go and be a proper person and get a proper job and that kind of thing. And I lasted a year and a half, and then I came back to Japan in the year 2002. And since then, I've been in Tsukuba in Ibaraki Prefecture. And in 2000,
Science City.
In Tsukuba Science City, that's right. And since 2008, I've been working at Tsukuba International School. And since 2011, I've been the head of that school.
Wow. So that's actually a really interesting kind of career path.
Yeah, kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I came to Japan on JET as well.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, in 2000.
And Daniel as well. Wow.
Yes.
And I was in Sendai, so not too far from Fukushima.
Yeah. Right. Daniel, where were you?
Down in Fukuoka, where I've just been this weekend, actually.
Oh, lovely.
So, yeah, built ties down there.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, JET is amazing. It's brought such a wide variety of people to Japan. It's been a good gamble, I think, for the Japanese government.
Yes.
Yeah, and especially in terms of like people going back as well and becoming, friends of Japan. It's a bit sinister in that way, isn't it?
It is, yeah. but it's easy. It's an easy sell, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so you're working at Tsukuba International School. Could you give us a definition of what an international school is? Because in Japan, there are all sorts of institutions that call themselves international schools. And some seem to be more school-like than others, more international than others. So what would your definition of an international school be?
So I should first of all say that I'm on the executive committee for the Japan Council of International Schools. And while I'm talking here today, I just want to make it clear that I'm just talking from my own perspective. I'm not representing like my school or the Japan Council of International Schools. I'm just giving my own personal opinions. The definition is tricky. And that's something that it really just depends on who you're talking to and what their goals are. So the sort of standard definition used to be, anyway, a school that has mainly foreign staff and that teaches in English. It used to be, before even up to quite recently, saying like it has to be English, but that's not necessarily true anymore. And that I think that another way that it was defined before was to say, that provides an education that primarily results in students going abroad for their education. But none of those things are necessarily true anymore. And there are, as you say, many, many schools that are kind of more business-like than school-like. And there's questions about, okay, is that in the same category as, some of these schools that have been in operation since, for 100 years, and look more traditionally like, a school that you would see in a sort of more Western country or something like that. So it's very controversial. This definition is very controversial, and the idea of diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice brings up lots of different topics about colonialism and things like that, and how tight should this definition be, and is it being kept tight to to spread a sort of dominant white culture through the world, and is that what we want it to be? And so this question of the definition is really quite tricky, and I don't personally like to have a tight definition, exclusive definition. I'd like it to be more inclusive. But that said, it does make it tricky when, for example, a school that is only a preschool calls themselves an international school. That's the one that I'm kind of like, you're an international kindergarten, okay?
Very common, yeah. So
Very
I mean,
common,
there's
yeah.
probably half a dozen international schools in Sendai, but yeah, I'm not sure what the quality is like across the board and that
That's
kind
the
of thing.
thing. Yeah, that's the thing. So that's what makes it tricky, and that's what makes it tricky for, I'm sure, for the Japanese government as well, to decide sort of how to treat international schools when some of them are really just preschools, and some are offering kindergarten to grade 12, or some subsection of that. And then now there's a lot of Japanese schools that are offering the international baccalaureate, but so does that make them an international school in some version of the definition? Maybe. So yeah, it's very murky waters. It's a question that is very hard to answer, actually, but that's my answer, that it's messy.
Okay, and then so for a parent who might be thinking about schooling, how should they go about choosing a school or evaluating a school for their child?
Well, my go-to answer for this is always to look at the Japan Council of International Schools website, because those are the schools that have been really the hallmark of quality for international schools, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion, but so you need to be looking at the school's accreditation, really, to be able to decide whether the school is acting sort of in good faith as a school. The accreditation committees for organizations like the Council of International Schools, or WASC. I think this is the Western Association of School Councils or something. I'm not sorry, we don't have WASC accreditation, so I can't remember the exact long form of that. But there are certain major accrediting agencies, and I think those are usually the best indication that the school is, for example, governed properly, and keeps safety and ethics in mind in its operations. And
so that would be the school would apply to one of these bodies, and the body would check them and give them a certificate, basically, that says
exactly. So my school, for example, is unfortunately I'm not there at the moment, but my school is actually going through its accreditation visit right now. And what happens is members come from overseas to Japan to inspect your school, and they speak to the students and the parents and the teachers and the board members, and the head of school, of course, and just everyone. So it's not just a paper process. It's a process. Of course, you have to submit a lot of paperwork, but then they actually come and they see if you're, for example, living according to your mission statement. Are you living, or your mission, and are you, here's what you say you're doing. Is that what you're actually doing? Here's what you've written on your website. Are you actually providing that level of service, or that level of care, or that level of education in your community? So that's a real hallmark of quality, I would say.
It seems like we have a comment agreeing with you there, Rob. Yeah, if you're a parent, you can ask if there's an accreditation process, which is pretty much exactly what you're saying, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that there are accreditation bodies and there are accreditation bodies. So you can, there are ones that are sort of easier to get, shall we say, than. So I would say that I personally think that the gold standard is the Council of International Schools. It's worldwide. It's really hard. You can't make it up. You really have to be walking the walk and talking the talk to be able to get CIS accreditation. Some schools will say that they've got accreditation from the Japanese government, but that's not a thing that you can get as an international school. I mean, unless you are an Article 1 school. You're not going to be accredited by the Japanese government. You can be a gakko hojin, or a school corporation, is what they call in Japan. International schools can be what's called kakushu gakko, or in the category of various schools. And so that it's a kind of recognition by the Japanese government that you're operating properly, and they do have some checks and balances in there. But I wouldn't go so far as just to call that an accreditation. It's
more like you exist as a corporation than you have quality or whatever. Are these visits scheduled, or do they just show up at some point?
No, they're very much scheduled. So, for example, my school right now is undergoing its preliminary visit, and so the Council of International Schools sends 2 people. They stay for about a week. And there's all this paperwork that we filled in. There's deadlines. We fill in all this paperwork. They come for a week. They give us some feedback. Then we run our self-study. That goes on for another year. Then they, it's not trivial. Then they will come back in about a year. And because we're an IB school, an International Baccalaureate school, we've decided to do a combined visit, or a synchronized visit with the IB. So then the IB will also send people. And so there will be probably 7 people or more staying for a week, and really just like digging into all kinds of different things about our school, and asking us really good and deep questions to help us just get better and better at what we do. And so, it's very, very scheduled. It's scheduled years in advance.
And how often does this happen, this process?
Every 5 years. So, so it's the visits are the accreditation visits are every 5 years. So the preliminary visit has to happen a few years before that, and the self-study happens a year before that, like that kind of thing. So it's it's kind of ongoing always.
Okay, it's a rolling kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, in the comments, Gareth said, like Ofsted for international schools. I was thinking the same thing. I don't know if that's UK only or elsewhere, but yeah, Ofsted.
Yeah, UK. That's UK only, but yes, that's it exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking actually before the stream about boarding schools and how some students might be suited to boarding schools and some might not. But how would you go about thinking about which students should attend an international school and which students might be better off in the Japanese school system?
That's a really good question, and I think that depends entirely on the family and their policy. I call it I recommend to families that apply to my school that they have a family policy, and they really, really think about what do you see or what do you want for the future of your child and the future of your family. If you think that your child is most likely going to grow up in Japan and get a full-time job in Japan, for example, then it can make a lot of sense for them to go through the Japanese education system. And as I said, I was a JET, so I've worked in the Japanese education system, and I don't consider myself to be an advocate for the Japanese system or the international school system. what I'm an advocate for is people having a family policy and really thinking about what is right for me and my family, what is right for my child. And it could even be different for this child versus this child. We have that in my school, where some children in a family are in our school, and other children in the same family are in Japanese school, because it just makes more sense for that family and for that child. So I think that there's no good answer, other than they're just factors to consider. So, for example, can people in your family communicate in Japanese? Can people in your family communicate in English? That's going to be a big deciding factor, because if you can't communicate with your child's school, you're going to find it very difficult to really understand what's going on and be able to jump in when your child is struggling, for example. Not to help your child, but not to help your child directly necessarily. I'm not saying that parents need to be there to do their homework for the child, but just to be able to communicate with the school community when there are any issues. So I think it's just really important for families to have conversations about bilingualism, for example, or the language that they're going to be using in their lives, and which language or languages do they consider to be their child's mother tongue, and therefore what sort of educational opportunities make the most sense for that child, for that particular child in that particular family.
Okay. Do you have a minimum kind of language ability, for example? So
We
if
do,
a
yeah.
child came to you and was like, okay, well, we don't have English now, but we want to join the school, I mean.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we can't really accept students who aren't at the right grade level in terms of their English, because we're such a small school and we don't have like a fleet of ESL teachers. We can't really support students who are much more than like a grade below or so. In the older grades. In my school, we have age 3 to grade 12, so age 3 to about 18-year-olds. And if they're 3 years old, then it doesn't matter. But if they're, for example, going into grade 4, and they can't read or write in English, or they can't speak English, for example, then yeah, that's not something that we can work with, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. I grew up in Spain, so I went to a German school.
Right.
I
Oh
think
gosh.
we had a year of kind of induction before joining the
Yeah.
school. So a
Yeah.
year of language study, and then
Yeah, if we could do something like that, like possibly in the future. Like my school is still kind of small, and in its I say that we're in our pioneering stage, even though actually the school has existed for more than 30 years. It's only been in its current location for 15 years, and we've only just expanded up to have grade 12 since 2019. And so there's still lots of things that we're putting in place. And so I'd like to do that in the future. I'd definitely like to be able to accept students like that. But for example, if my school was in Canada, and we had a child who didn't read or write English, or even speak English, and they were going into grade 4, they would be completely surrounded by native English speakers, mostly, and they would have English TV and they would have English culture all around them. And so there would be these supports in place, not just in school, but outside of school, for the child to be developing the vocabulary and, becoming self-motivated to speak and read and write English. Whereas in my school, almost everybody is a second language learner of English. And so they're from all kinds of different countries. And I would say the environment is not great to support second language learners. It's too small. There's only one class per grade, and the outside our school is all Japanese. Inside our school, we have lots of kids who can speak Japanese. So especially a Japanese child who comes to our school and doesn't have the language skills, for example, is going to be better served by a Japanese school than our school. So it's really unfortunate, because grade 4 is not too old to learn a language. It's absolutely possible for them to learn English at that stage, but whether or not my school is the best place for them to do that is a different question.
Right. Yeah. Where do your graduates go? Would be the
They
next
go everywhere. So yeah, we've got it on, we listed on our website all the schools that our students have gone to. So like I said, we've just started graduating students from high school in 2019, but we have students going to all kinds of universities in Japan, first of all, because 2019, 2020, we're talking COVID, right? And so the students, many students who were planning to go overseas for university didn't necessarily want to go overseas and then sit in online classes. And so that caused a kind of explosion of students looking more towards staying in Japan. And so many national and private universities in Japan, like Sophia and ICU and Waseda and, public universities like Tohoku and Tsukuba University, Kyoto, these kinds of universities, plus a number of universities in Canada, the United States, England, Australia, Holland as well has been a popular one at my school. So yeah, just anywhere and everywhere. And that's due to the IB. That's due to the International Baccalaureate being such a great program to get students into tertiary education.
Is there an issue with students joining Japanese universities? So would they need to use like the foreign student track or something if they were going to do that?
So they use the IB track in most cases, the International Baccalaureate admissions process. And but the issue is in Japan that there isn't one sort of standard way to apply to university. You have to actually go to that particular university's website and look up their process. And in some cases, you might even have to go to that department in that university to figure out what that department's admissions process is. And so there's no standardized system. Many universities now in Japan, because Japan has been pushing for public Japanese schools to offer the International Baccalaureate. Because of that, many universities have started accepting the International Baccalaureate at face value, rather than saying that students have to have done that and then also do the sentashken, the entrance exams for Japanese universities. So they're taking the IB score at face value and saying, okay, if you got this score, because it's a series of 5 or 6 exams that students are taking. So they shouldn't necessarily, plus an extended essay, plus they've done service and learning. Service opportunities. It's a very rich and high quality, internationally accepted, high school certificate. So rather than getting students to jump through more hoops, they're just accepting it as is. But whether or not the university does that is up to the university, and as I say, sometimes up to the department of the university. So like a particular university's medical section might say, no, you still have to take the sentashken. But that same university's geography department, for example, might say, yeah, for sure, we'll just take the IB as it is.
Okay, so it's pretty complicated.
It's really complicated. Yeah, it is.
Okay, so jumping back to international schools, what would you say the advantages and the disadvantages of an international school would be?
Advantages and disadvantages.
Compared to a local Japanese public or private school?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to answer that question because, like I say, it really depends on the family. So, advantages are, if you only speak English, if you don't speak Japanese, you're going to be able to speak to your child's teachers. Disadvantages can be that, you're going to graduate not having been through the Japanese system. So you're not going to have the same level of understanding of various things as in relation to Japanese culture, for example, as somebody who's been through the Japanese system. Some international schools like mine, for example, do take Japanese learning very, very seriously as well, and we try to graduate students who can function in English and in Japanese as much as possible, and so. So it depending on the school that you go to, depending on the international school that you choose, that can be more of a sort of harder choice. But yeah, and it's a different style of education. It tends to be a different style of education, but there are international schools that are very much about rote learning, similar to the Japanese system. Whereas, for example, excuse me, some of the some of the Indian international schools that use the Indian curriculum are a lot more strict in that. Not strict, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's a lot more rote learning, perhaps in schools like that. So that, like, this is the thing, the term international school, just, it can be French schools, it can be German schools, it can be Korean schools, it can be, there's so many different Indian schools, of course. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say, like, blanket statements like, international schools are good for this and Japanese schools are good for this. I really, really think it all depends on what the family wants for their child.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, actually, my personal experience too. Like, I went to the German school, and it was very rigid, and let's memorize everything, and then I transferred to an American school, which is a better fit for me. So
it's fit. That's the whole thing, right? Like, it's really what fits your child. For some students, for example, some students who come to my school has inquiry-based learning. For example, in the very young grades, play-based learning. Which sounds like paradise to a child who wants to explore things on their own and wants to play and learn. But some children just have the personality that they need structure, and they need a lot more structure, for example, than my school might provide. They need quiet. And the classrooms at my school are not necessarily quiet. There's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of dynamism in play, and some children would prefer for things to be quiet and for things to be structured. And I know that I need to work on this now, and I know that I need to do this work, which will result in this grade, which will get me into this school. So it's fit. It's exactly, that's the perfect word for it. And like I say, it can be this sibling in this family needs this, and this sibling in this family needs that. And I hope that parents recognize that and don't just say, my child is going to be in international school or my child is going to be in Japanese school, but really, really look at the needs of the child, not just the need of the parent to have things go their way.
I think that applies to a lot of things with children, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does.
I could jump in from a parent's point of view. So our son went to a Japanese school, elementary up to grade 6, and then junior high and high school was at a international school here. Right. And he was kind of flexible. He enjoyed both schools. Well, he won't admit it right now, but he did. Yeah. We saw his face when he came home every day. He was fine. And the benefit outside the sort of education side was that he got to see that on the one hand, you've got the desks in a line, but then you also got desks can be in groups. We can learn in groups, and you still get your education. And on the other hand, it's writing in books and a paper, and the other one is on a computer listening to your earphones during a lesson, and that's also fine. So it was really just a broadening of sort of his, not horizons, what's the word? Broadening his mind, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or just seeing that there's no one right way to do anything, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. And I see that with some of our students as well, who come in from different school systems, not just Japanese schools, but public schools from other countries. American students will come in, for example, and our school is not my school is not an American school, and it's culture shock for them as well as for a Japanese student coming in from elsewhere. And so it is. And sometimes, as we all did, I think all of us coming as Jets, when we first came in, we're like, why does the Japanese school system do it like this? And why does Japan do it like this? And why can't they do it more like they do it? Why can't they do it more the way I expect things to go? And, that opening of minds is really important.
And the different, just hearing the different languages at playtime or break time.
Yeah.
As a parent, when we go to the school visits, just hearing these different languages was just wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a really nice environment. It's a great environment to work as well. You know, that side of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Having worked at Japanese schools and in my international school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last kind of big topic on this is cost. So
since this is an
international school.
This is the Retire Japan show.
Yeah, personal finance.
Actually, one of the forum topics we're going to discuss later on is talking about trying to plan for educational costs or child costs. So, what do you have a kind of rough kind of ballpark for the cost of fees for a school, and maybe more than fees? You know, there's often extra charges that people might not be aware of. I know we were talking about Harrow, Harrow International School, which might be the most expensive or one of the most expensive.
I would say so. Yeah, I think that. So my school is one of the less expensive, completely accredited, continuum IB schools, and we're at. I think that probably ours is. I might be making a mistake here, so please correct anyone. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about my own school, but I would say about 1.8 million yen for my school for 1 year. Versus Harrow, which again I could be wrong, but I believe that because it's full boarding and everybody is a boarding student, I believe that they're more like 8 million yen. So it's a huge range. I think that. A super high quality school in Tokyo, for example, would be 2.5 to 3 million yen roughly. And so any, roughly 2 to 3 million yen for like a high quality accredited international school pretty much anywhere in Japan, but you can pay more and you can pay a little bit less as well.
Right. Even private high school here. I mean, I think we were paying about 50,000 yen a month. So, that's probably 500,000 to 1 million yen a year just for normal private high school.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's expensive. Education is expensive in Japan.
Well, it depends where you're
coming from. Yeah.
We were talking about the school I went to in the UK, and it's up there with Harrow fees. Now,
oh, right.
I looked it up and I was like, oh, maybe my granddaughter. No, my granddaughter could not go there.
No, yeah. It's crazy. It's a little bit crazy. Like even me, running the school, I sometimes marvel at the fact that people are willing to spend that much money for their child to go to, a preschool, like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. They're paying way more than I paid to go to university, and so. Yeah, it's a whole new world. It's very different from the world that we grew up in.
Even when I was in boarding school, we would have discussions, at night after lights out, like thinking about the fees and whether we would prefer to have the education or just get the money as a lump sum. And like which would be better.
Yeah.
And looking back, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I had a great education and it served me really well. But on the other hand, getting 50,000-60,000 pounds at the age of 18 as well, that would also have been very helpful. So
yeah. If you knew how to use it, if you had done your, if you knew what you knew now, yes.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd have probably spent it on, traveling and a car and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it would not have been useful. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure long term the education has served you better.
Yeah, I think so, and just even the experience and the memories and the friendships as well. So I mean, this trip I was visiting friends from school. So
right, nice,
awesome. So I think we can kind of move on from schooling.
Sure.
So you've been here longer than me.
Okay.
Daniel, how long have you been here?
About 20 years this year, I think it was.
So about the same, right? So Shaney, you're our senpai in terms of living in Japan. So what's your kind of takeaway? I mean, a lot of our readers, for example, or viewers, are going to be newer to Japan. So, what is there anything that you've kind of learned as lessons or advice for people and how to have a good life in Japan for decades?
Yeah, like we were kind of touching on earlier, I think when I first came to Japan, I was filled with all of my Canadian thoughts about how the world should work, and I wanted Japan to be more like Canada, and for Japanese people to be more like me, and through the years, I've definitely learned to be more to my eyes have opened more to the the great things about Japan, not just good but great things about Japan, because they aren't Canada, because they don't do things in a Canadian way, and I think that after a few years in Japan, you develop a sort of I developed, I don't know whether everybody does, but I developed a more mature viewpoint or perspective on things that used to drive me crazy and still do. I can now look at and say, yes, but it's like that because and whatever the explanation is. So for example, there's a topic that will be near and dear to Retire Japan viewers' hearts is the banking system in this country. That, like, back when I came to Japan in 1995, we were already using debit cards, which are still not really a thing here 25 years later. And so, like, that used to drive me crazy. Plus the fact that every time you go to the bank, like my name is Shaney Crawford. I have a middle name that may or may not need to be in the mix when I'm applying for something. I remember going to the postal bank and filling out a form so that I could take out, $100, not even, not a huge amount of money. And I say $100. I mean 10,000 yen. So I just translate automatically. I just cut off 2 zeros. I don't even care about the exchange. That's another, maybe a long-term Japan thing. Like, it doesn't matter. The exchange goes up, it goes down, whatever. Lop off 2 zeros. It's $100. Anyway, it's, I was trying to take some money out, and I had to fill in the paperwork twice. Because first of all, like I cringe at having to fill out paperwork. I'm like, you have a computer right there. You can look it up right now. And I have to fill out this stupid piece of paper. But I had written my name as it's written here on the screen with, capital S, small h, da, 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 da. And they would not accept it because it was supposed to have been written in all capitals. And I was like, it's the same thing. And like things like that are frustrating. They're so frustrating, especially as a newcomer to Japan. There's so many times when you're like, no, I'm not doing this. Like, I can't do that. I'd like, don't make me do this, but you're made to do it. But I realized that, long term, after, staying in Japan for a longer time, things like that are what make Japan safe and polite and secure. And, the fact that they literally have a paper trail, if you want to take money out of your account, you need to fill out a piece of paper. They will keep that paper and be like, look, you came in and did this. And it means that nobody else can come in and do that unless they've got my hanko, right? And so there's a cost and there's a savings to everything. And that's made me appreciate Japan a lot more after being here for a few years.
Okay. I might say that it's more of a curve.
Yeah.
So I'd say people who just got here are more accepting.
Yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
true.
Fine.
That's true.
After you've been here for a while, you start getting annoyed at certain things. Like,
yeah.
I went to the ward office a couple of years ago and filled in some paperwork. And they said, no, you can't write your date of birth in Showa. Has to be in 19 whatever, and that really annoyed me for it's fine, doesn't matter, but it was
I just hate having to fill forms out over and over again because you made the mistake. And that like, sometimes you can just cross it out and hunko it, but sometimes you literally have to rewrite the whole form. And I hate writing forms to begin with. And so like, I just, that gets my Canadian rage going.
Yeah, especially when it's not a mistake. It's just formatting thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like Shaney Crawford written in caps versus, title case. Yeah.
It's like websites, right, Daniel? Like they should be able to, when you fill in websites and it's like that's the wrong font or whatever it is. They should be able to just do it automatically, right?
Yeah, the double width versus
As Shaney says, in the background, it makes no difference. But the way they programmed it or whatever,
yeah.
As so, a comment from Lex de Leonis says, leave expectations at home. And going back to your curve, I kind of like, I've gone on the upside, I've gone on the downside, and now I'm like, yeah, whatever. And at a previous workplace, there was a guy here who would always say, TIJ, this is Japan. And that really helps me when something weird's happened. I say, TIJ, and it somehow calms me down. So.
I like that. Yeah, that's it. That's it exactly. Like this is Japan, and you're not Japanese. And even even that thing, whatever it is, can frustrate Japanese people as well. But I always I like that this is Japan. I think I'm going to keep that. But I think it's the same sort of essence that. Like there are like good things happen because of the way that they do things here. And like, I feel that one of the key features of Japan is that people are chanto. They do things properly. And Canadians, we don't do things properly. We do things to get them done. And that's a difference. And that's a big, huge cultural difference. And it makes for very different cultures that both have really good points. But this is
basically, I think you can't pick and choose, right? So you either take Japanese culture as a whole.
Yeah.
You can't be like, oh, I like these aspects of Japanese culture, but I don't like that aspect. It's not a menu, right?
I mean, you can, but you're just going to build up resentments in your heart and not be able to live here happily. So it's better just to be like, this is Japan.
Yep. I love living here. Great. So if that's the cost of it, that's okay.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay, so how to successfully live in Japan for decades? Like be chill out.
Be okay with things.
There's always that, the culture shock thing where it goes in cycles.
Yeah.
So you have culture shock over and over and over again, but the waves get smaller as you go.
Yeah. I had quite a bit of. I wouldn't say so. The interesting thing is, when I graduated from high school and before I went to university, I did a gap year and I lived in England.
That must have been culture shock.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So all of this. So when I went to England, it was 1990, 1991. And when I came to Japan, it was 1995. So this is all pre-internet. Email. I had an email address when I came to Japan, but you couldn't really use the internet. Like I didn't know where I was going exactly in Japan when I arrived because the town where I was didn't appear on any atlases. So I couldn't do a huge amount of research into Japan before I came, and other than what I could read in encyclopedias. Amazon didn't exist as well. So whatever my local bookstore had about Japan is about all that I could do. And also I didn't do any research into England before I moved there because I thought that it's going to be the same because I knew lots of British people and because there's lots of British people in Canada. And I thought it would basically be the same as Canada, but like smaller. And when I went, I had enormous culture shock in England because it was so different from my expectations. I expected it to be kind of the same, and it was really not. It was, there's so many different things between Canada and England. It's, England is just so much older. The culture is very, very different. And so I really struggled with that. Whereas with Japan, I was expecting it to be like worlds apart. I was expecting it to be like so unfamiliar and so unexpected in every possible way that when I came, I was like, these people are just people. And I wasn't, I didn't have as much culture shock then. But I did have, I did have culture shock. But the biggest thing that I experienced with culture shock was the different way to become friends with people in Canada versus Japan. In Canada, if I've met a person once, and I see them again, oh, do you want to go for a movie? Like we're very casual about friendships in Canada. I feel we want to be friends with everybody. That's what I've learned from being in Japan. People say that, like, you Canadians, you're so friendly. You just want to be friends with everybody. You're a little too promiscuous with your friendships. In fact, British people say that about us, even. Whereas in Japan, it takes a long time to get through the shell, as I like to think of it, of a Japanese person, and to let them let you into their hearts. And so that frustrated me. I'd been in Japan for like 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't have any friends yet, and then still after, a couple of months, I was trying to invite people to my home, and people were like,
that's a bit weird.
No, not that. And so, yeah, that was the biggest culture shock for me, I think, was just how to make friends. And I realized that after a few years, I have an expression that goes through my head when I think about this, and that is strange and off-putting. We are, when we first come to Japan, strange and off-putting. We do a lot of things that really set people off a little bit, with just trying to be friendly and trying to be like, whatever it is, we're being all gaijin at people. And
even having guests come and going around with them, you're like, no, we don't make jokes.
We don't do that here. Don't do that. You're being strange and off-putting.
It just freaks them out. So
yeah. And so we have to kind of rein ourselves in a little bit. And once we do that, once we realize that we're being strange and off-putting, we can rein it in, and therefore we can start to make friends. I think that's a bit of advice that can help people as well.
I made a faux pas along those lines. I was invited to the wedding of a work colleague and to give a speech because I was I suppose the novelty of having a foreigner there. And it must have been a year or two that we'd been colleagues in the same department, got on pretty well. And he was young, but relatively the same age. And so, wedding speech, it's where you make a bit of fun of them, I talked about one time when he was drunk and blah, blah, blah. Oh, and it didn't go down well at all.
Oh, no.
Anything, but nobody was laughing, and everyone was like, okay, let's just carry on with the next speech now. I could feel the tension, the atmosphere is like, okay, I misjudged this.
Yeah, strange and off-putting. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. Actually, I often think that the UK is more similar to Japan than, say, America.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's a common language, the culture's very different. So
I find, I think like I say, there's many differences between Canada and Japan, but there's actually a lot of similarities as well. The sort of gentleness,
politeness,
yeah.
Say that all the time.
I think and I guess that's the key as well to being happy living in Japan for a long time, is to find the similarities, not the differences.
Yeah, another thing is if like often as foreign residents, we're allowed to opt out a bit of society if we want to, right? We don't have the same kind of obligations.
Yeah.
So especially if you're not working for a very Japanese employer, and you can often be like, okay, so I don't have these obligations and entanglements that Japanese people growing up here would have. So.
Yeah, and I think that I hear some people say things like, well, you'll never fit in, you'll never be accepted as Japanese, and that kind of thinking can cause a barrier to people who are thinking about whether they want to stay here long term or not. But I think in my case, I never thought that, look at me, I'm not going to fit in as Japanese, and I never thought that I had to. And I don't want to. I am myself. I'm Canadian. I bring my own Canadianness and my own self to Japan, and I try to not be strange and off-putting. I try to fit in as much as possible, but I don't ever expect to be 100% accepted as a Japanese person. That's not me, and I'm fine with that. But I know that does bother a lot of people, and they can't accept it.
Yeah, in a way, it's not a very realistic expectation.
Yeah,
like if I moved to Manchester in the UK, no one's gonna accept me as a Mancunian all of a sudden. Like,
Yeah.
You'd have to earn it over
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Even in your own country, right? Like,
For
I think.
sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's definitely a healthier way to look at that and be like, okay, so that of course that's not going to happen, but I can still be happy and comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I own a home in Japan, and I live in a little village where we have like the kaidanban and everything like that. And there's all these like expectations and obligations. And so like I try to do my part, and I try to, fit in and do the right thing. But I don't therefore expect that people are going to then treat me completely as a Japanese person. That's an unrealistic expectation, I think.
Yeah. On the other side of living in Japan and being happy is not being in financial difficulties. So
Yeah.
what's your take on personal finance then? So how are you approaching things?
So when I first came to Japan, had no idea how to manage my money. And it wasn't until, so I was so happy to be making 3.6 million yen. I was like, wow, like, what can I do with, what am I going to do with all this money? And I spent it. I earned it, and I spent it, and I earned it, and I spent it. And then it wasn't until I went back to Canada, like just at the end of my time in Japan, especially because I wasn't even, when I was a private CIR, I wasn't even making 3.6 million. I was making more like 2.4 million or something like that. No, even less than that, because it wasn't even 200,000 per month. So yeah, I wasn't making very much at all. But when I moved back to Canada is when I started thinking about personal finance and started learning about it. I was able to buy some, because I was in Canada, I was in Toronto, I was able to buy some books and do some research and start learning, from books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and things like that way back then, and learning, from my friends and from other people about like what is a mutual fund, what is compound interest, this kind of thing. And so I literally wasn't, I was 30 by the time I started to think about it and started to think about trying to get some investments. But I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was living in Toronto, and it was very expensive to live in Toronto. But I did manage to put aside a little bit of money then. Then I decided to come back to Japan, and I was a student. Again, I did a master's degree in the University of Tsukuba, and it was very hard to make ends meet again. So I kind of had the knowledge, but I couldn't apply it. And then coming out of that experience, when I got a job again, I started to try to save money. And at that time, my only way to understand how to do that was to go through one of the companies that was offering like expat finance, I don't know what to call it, advice, financial advice. And so I still actually do have some savings in that system. But I've recognized more recently, obviously, that like my personal philosophy, or the way that I invest, or the way that I think about personal finance, is I want to figure out a system, put money that goes automatically into that system, and forget about it. I don't want to fiddle with it. I don't want to be reading up on companies and their profit lines and shareholders and blah, blah, blah. Like I don't have time for that. And I don't care about it. And so I want somebody to advise me on how to get things set up. Remember, Ben, a couple of weeks ago, you talked about, what was it? It was about, I think it was about personal fitness, about the reason that RetireJapan can exist as a company, or not as a company, but as an entity, is that some people don't want to do it. Like some people would rather pay somebody to do that thing than to do it themselves. And that's how I feel about my personal finance. I'd rather pay somebody to tell me, okay, it's time to switch funds here, or whatever. It's time to set up IDECO or NISA or whatever. And just fine, I will pay you. Tell me what to do. I will do it. And then I don't want to think about it anymore. That's my personal philosophy about finance.
Well, I mean that's probably got the highest rate of success, assuming that you're doing something somewhat sensible.
And assuming I've got good advisors.
Doing it for the long term.
Yeah. assuming I've got good advisors, then
yeah.
I think, yeah, it's probably best. Yeah, I mean, I think the more dangerous thing to do would be to, like, if for a person like me who is not actually interested in the topic of finance as a topic, of regular daily, conversations. I'm not looking at markets and upswings and blah, blah, blah. It would be more dangerous for me to try to like wrestle control of it and try to buy and sell or on a regular basis and stuff like that. So I think it makes more sense this way. And I thought that when I started working with a personal finance advisor, she asked me, are you a risky investor? Do you have a high tolerance of risk or not, or whatever? And I was like, no tolerance of risk. I don't want to, I want to keep my money. I don't want to, But then as it turned out, my actual style of investing is super risk friendly, because I won't look. I don't check. So I'm very risk tolerant.
Blissfully unaware of what's going on.
Blissfully unaware. So I just put my money in every month. It comes out automatically. I may or may not look at the statements in a year. Like, I really don't care. So I'm actually super, super risk friendly, as it turns out.
Well, there's that story about Fidelity in the US doing a kind of research on their customers and finding a subset of their customers that drastically outperformed everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked into who these super investors were.
Yeah.
And it turned out that they were either dead or they'd lost their login.
That's awesome.
They couldn't touch their accounts, basically.
Yeah.
And so those accounts were doing great and everyone else was underperforming. So
interesting. Yeah, I really think, because doesn't Warren Buffett say something like that, about like just pick it and stick with it rather than kind of go crazy? I remember reading that somewhere. Maybe it's apocryphal. But
yeah, I mean his obviously he's an active investor, but his will. So when he's leaving stuff for his family, it stipulates that everything goes into index funds. Like
right. Like, don't mess around with it. You're not as smart as all that. Exactly. That's my personal investment theory. You're not as smart as all that.
Yeah, and thinking that you are is where you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah. I recognize this is not my area of expertise. I'm smart in some aspects, but there are certain areas of my life where I'm not. One is this personal finance, and the other is food. This is a kind of another interesting topic for me to talk about. I don't know if it's interesting for anybody else, but I realize that I make terrible decisions about food, and by getting help in that department, I've managed to lose 103 pounds over the past year and a half by realizing that I'm not an expert in this, and I shouldn't think that I am.
Yeah, that is very impressive. So I've been all proud of myself because I lost, like 15 pounds or something.
That's also good, because it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard thing.
Yeah, similar for me. So I've come to realize that my relationship with food is emotional and habit based, and it's based on stress and kind of self-medication, and not nice and quite difficult to kind of own up to, because it's like any kind of addiction where you're slightly ashamed of it and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah, this idea,
and much like personal finance, getting to grips with it can make your life much better.
It really can. That's the thing. Like I think of it as like admitting defeat, like admitting that you are not the expert in this thing that's got you in its grip, and asking for help. Like that's hard for me. I always think, I need to do it. I need to figure this out. I need to get better at this. I need to. But sometimes you don't need to. You need to admit defeat and ask for help and get good help. Don't make sure that your advisors are good. But it's in that act of asking for help and admitting defeat that you can finally make some progress.
We were like that with our accountant, actually. Thought, no, I should be intelligent enough to do this myself. And eventually we got an accountant for the end of year tax, and it was such a good decision.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? I am actually not smart enough, and that's okay. I'm smart in this department. I'm smart in that department. This is not my wheelhouse, and that's okay. I don't have to have all the wheelhouses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So today, a bit later on in the program, we're going to be talking about side hustles in Japan. And I've noticed through your LinkedIn posts that you are thinking about maybe branching out. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I've just been recently thinking about this idea of becoming a coach, and not a sports coach. I don't have any thoughts of coaching basketball or anything like that. But and not exactly a life coach. I mean, the life coach has this sort of bad connotation to it sometimes, and especially there's a documentary out recently, a podcast about this coaching company that is just a massive scam that is just like scamming people out of money. And so not that either, but just the idea of being what I call a thinking partner. So when someone is stuck and they're trying to figure something out, they're trying to figure out the next move in their life, or even just their next move in their day, and they're kind of having trouble deciding what is the next right move, they can hire a coach, and it can be a long-term thing, or it can be like a one-off thing, to ask them for help with it. And I love that idea, and I love the idea of helping people that way. So I started to look into this, and I actually hired a coach to help me think about this. And I realized that, yes, this is something that I want to do. And so I've just since April started doing the training to become a coach. And this could turn into a hobby. It could turn into a side business. It could turn into a full-time business. I don't know. And I'm trying not to have expectations attached to it at this point, where I'm still in the exploring stage. I'm trying to extend the exploring stage as long as possible. I don't intend to, just in case any of my students or parents or colleagues at my school are watching, I'm not intending to quit my job at Scuba International School. But it's just something that I'm exploring right now. And I have it in my mind that I'm going to explore it for 2 years. And not because my personality is like, no, everything has to be now. And so instead of that, I've given myself this 2-year span of time to explore coaching, to try it out, to see if it's something that I like doing and that I want to do more of. And if so, what does that mean? That kind of stuff. So that's where I am on
so it's not necessarily for teachers. It's more kind of strategy, kind of
for anybody.
Focus.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And not just strategy, but literally, like, I'm having difficulty engaging with this particular person, and I don't know why, and I don't know what my next move is. Like, it can be that. It can be like I need to have a difficult conversation, and I need help with figuring out how to start that or how to do that. It can be about anything at all.
Wow. And what's the training that you mentioned?
So you can get accredited as a coach. It's an unregulated industry at the moment, so you don't have to get accredited. But I, just based on my experience as a leader of a school, I believe in accreditation. And so I'm currently thinking of getting accredited as a coach. There are as many different ways to learn about coaching, or to study about coaching, or to be accredited as a coach as there are people. So the way that I went about it was to try to find, like, this is a kind of common thread through this conversation, trying to find an advisor that I trust, or somebody that I trust, somebody who's thinking that I trust, and to study under them. And so I have chosen to study with a woman by the name of Claire Pedrick, who's written a book called Simplifying Coaching. And I really just, everything that she stands for really resonates with me. This idea that coaching doesn't have to be so complicated. You don't need to memorize all kinds of different little schemes and things like that, but it's more about being present, 100% present with the other person, and holding the space for them to do their own thinking. It's not about me like imposing, well, why don't you do this? You should probably just do it this way. It's not about that, but it's about being a vessel, or providing a vessel for the other person to be able to sort of open up and put their own thoughts towards their own problem. Because the person themselves, the answer is inside them. They know more about whatever situation it is than they will ever be able to express to me or to anybody else. So I'm just there to hold the vessel, hold their thoughts for them, and kind of show them back to them and being like, what do you think? And so Claire is an absolute master at it. She is just a thing to behold. If you can witness her coaching, it's just incredible the work that she does, and I really respect that. And so I decided to learn under her.
Awesome. I'm going to check this book out because I do coaching myself as well.
Right.
Without any training. So
you're right. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. So I think we're kind of coming to the end of our interview. Is there anything that you'd like to add for the Retire Japan kind of audience in terms of a resource or a book or a thought or anything like that?
Gosh, we've talked about so many things, so I can't really sum everything up in one paragraph or in one sentence. I guess I could say people can find me on LinkedIn if they have any questions. I do get a lot of, because I'm on the, as I said, the executive committee of the Japan Council of International Schools. I'm also on the executive committee of the IB Association of Japan. So I get a lot of questions about international schools. My answer is always, the answer is inside you. Maybe that's the theme of this, get a good advisor, and the answer is always inside you. So, I'm happy to connect with people through LinkedIn.
All right. Can we share your profile and stuff?
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the description.
Excellent.
As we always do.
Yeah, excellent. And
put a link to your school in the comments as well. Scuba International School.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's a small school and we have a big waiting list.
Really?
But which is always frustrating to people. It's frustrating to me as well. I'm a very sort of inclusive person, and I want everybody to be able to join. But I also really think it's important to. I have a vision for this school. That it should remain small. It should remain intentionally small, with very high quality. And so that unfortunately means that we can't accept everybody. We have a limit of the number of students that we have per class, and we respect that limit. And so we can't accept a new student unless somebody else leaves, and we don't necessarily want any of our students to leave either, because we have a great relationship with all of our families. So. But anyway, yes, I'm happy if people are interested in my school as well, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Shane, especially under the current circumstances.
It's my pleasure.
I think you haven't had breakfast yet. So.
Yes, I'm super hungry, so I'm going to go off and get my breakfast.
And
thank you so much. And we'll see you on LinkedIn.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to your future episodes.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much, Shaney.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you for our commenters as well, Mohammed and several others earlier on. Good comments there.
I think this like multiple streaming thing works really well, doesn't it? Like we can see where the comments are coming from. They're coming from LinkedIn, they're coming from Facebook, they're coming from YouTube. Brilliant.
Yes, maybe we should explain. Some people, the system we've got now, we're actually streaming this on for the first time, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And so if you're on YouTube, for example, you can see YouTube comments, but we're getting others from Facebook and LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for those.
Yeah,
if we get questions in there, we will read them out.
Streamyard, by the way, if anyone's interested, I think it's fantastic. Really enjoy the platform. We tried it out last time, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
I think for the first time, and it was so good that I happily paid for the paid version, which gives us this ability to stream to several platforms at the same time. All right, so On to the news. So we've actually got, I think today's show might be our best one yet, just in terms of content. Like, what a great interview we just had. Really wide-ranging. Fantastic guest to have, especially considering it's 7 a.m. She was surprisingly
very well
awake and active there. And then we're going to be talking about side hustles later on, which I think is very interesting to a lot of people, especially now with inflation going up and wages not necessarily going up as much. So lots of people are thinking, how can I make some extra money on the side? We're going to talk about that later on. But first, let's talk about the news.
Yes, we have a few things as usual. And we start off with, I think I'll put this in here. Something that I saw in the news, which we don't have to talk about that long, but they do this. So we try to find things during the month before the podcast and sort of put them in a note. And I get these links from Japan Today, and then they seem to remove them after a couple of weeks. They
archive them or they delete them. Yeah.
Why? Well, anyway, it's gone now. But it was an article just explaining how Japan aims to draw 100 trillion yen foreign investment from foreigners coming to Japan and from digital nomads. And they're trying, but I can't see how just throwing money at the problem is going to make a big difference. And I think it was there was some visa changes, but still very small visa changes that's not going to really make a big
I saw that. So they've got a new category for people that make over 20 million yen or something. I'm like, all right, who are these 6 people that make that much money?
Right.
The big thing, though, I mean, in terms of foreign investment, you see Warren Buffett talking up Japan, and I think that's made a big difference. So we've had a huge influx of foreign investors investing in Japanese companies and in real estate in Japan. And the weak yen, even though it is terrible if you try to leave Japan, like I have, so I'm sitting here in Europe not being able to afford anything. But, if you're on the outside looking in, everything's on sale. So I saw an article today that said the performance to date of the Nikkei is like 20% this year. It's gone up. So
it is wonderful. I check it nearly every day now. I don't know how long it'll last, but yeah. Although if you're coming over here to get us and getting paid here, then of course the cheap prices are balanced by the low salary, relatively low salary.
But if you're a digital nomad and you can get a visa, I don't know. I mean, it's been hard so far to be self-employed here and legally work, right? We're going to talk about that later with the side hustle thing. But
yes,
there would need to be a new visa category for these people, wouldn't there?
Yes, there is the startup visa, I think, which is only for a year. And I thought they were discussing how to extend that, but you get a year basically to make your startup work, and then you can get that so-called proper visa and stay longer if you've got above a certain amount, or you can.
But even that's like, okay, if you're making a formal, but if you're just working as a freelancer online, technically at the moment, if you came to Japan on a tourist visa and you were working, you had a YouTube channel or you were doing freelance work, you'd be working illegally in Japan. So you would need a visa to do that.
Yes. Hannah, what's her username now? Currently Hannah, I think it is. She's a YouTuber. I think she's trying to do it full time. And she wrote a video. She made a video where she's very upset because she had to leave Japan because visa expired, and she applied. So I've got this income coming in. I'm focused on Japan, but it wasn't accepted.
It doesn't really fit into the existing visa categories. So I guess if they want digital nomads to come here, they're going to have to make a digital nomad visa that makes it possible for that, which might be good. I mean, if Japan is very cheap now. It's comparable to the other kind of cheap countries like Thailand and so on. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Cool. And then we had the question last time that we promised to answer, and you came through on this. So can I brew my own, beer in Japan?
Right. Yes. Question all of us have asked, I think. And I don't have a link to a legal site, but I do have a link to a sort of reliable source, which is the Tokyo Metropolitan Foundation called Tsunagari. So it's a non-profit organization in Tokyo for foreigners. And one of the articles is about brewing your own beer in Tokyo. And it starts off by saying, I'll read it out. Abroad, outside Japan, the home brewing craft beer scene is enjoying a boom in recent years, while in Japan, laws concerning liquor taxation prohibit making alcohol in your own home. Sad face. However, this is the article saying this, I heard there are microbreweries where you can enjoy the home brewing experience popping up in Tokyo. And so the article is about one example where the brewery is kind of like having these hands-on workshop experiences. So you can brew beer legally within Japan, kind of as a one-time hobby thing. But no, you cannot brew it at home without a license in Japan.
So you'd have to partner with a brewery. So they have the license, they'll do it, and you can be involved. It's kind of like having an allotment or something, maybe.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah. So, beer.
But yeah, you can't brew beer at home. I guess for personal use, you're unlikely to get caught. But if you were selling it or sharing it, that would be quite risky, I think.
Ah, yes. No, I don't think you can even brew it for your own use at home.
No.
Yeah. Put the link.
Legally, that would be a very bad idea. Much like playing poker with the boys on Friday or whatever, which is also illegal. So gambling in Japan for money, completely illegal. And, worst case scenario, you would get arrested for playing poker with your friends for money. So
if you do it for money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you found, this is all you. Well done. So you found an interesting article from one of my favorite writers.
Yes. This came up completely separately, actually. But yeah, Morgan. So or you follow him more than I do. Morgan Housel, is it? Housel?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Housel, I thought it was, but who knows?
Yeah.
It's probably Dutch or something, Like
I see. Kai said that was his question. Oh, yes, I remember you, Kai. Yes, thank you. Oh, somebody's mentioned Brimmer Brewing in Kawasaki. Oh, that sounds good. Wow. Right. And I'm going to put in then. So going back to this article, the Morgan guy, he posted a sort of summary of his life learnings and thoughts and things related to all different things. And of course, there are some finance related ones in there. So I thought they were pretty good. And I went through and just pulled out some of the finance ones that I liked. And I thought I would read them through kind of let's go sort of top 5. Let's go from 5 to 1. And so I'm going to quote them here. So the first one he says is the best measure of wealth. Actually, these first two are kind of related. The best measure of wealth is what you have minus what you want. In brackets, by this measure, some billionaires are broke because they want more than
absolutely. So being comfortable in your own skin is what this is basically. Are you happy with the present moment?
Yes. I saw quite a while ago now somebody saying one way to be better off is obviously you can adjust your income, you can adjust your expenditure, or you can adjust your expectations, which I thought was quite good. And relatedly, the next one I have on the list from him is the most valuable personal finance asset is not needing to impress anyone. Again, very true. And so this goes with something I read a long time ago on the Motley Fool forums.
He used to work for the Motley Fool, by the way, Morgan Housel.
You did? Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, so I used to follow them a lot. I would, check the forums all the time. And I remember one person who was saying that he had about £100,000 in shares and stuff. And I'm like, wow, how do you get to that level? And one thing he said is that when he was younger, he always used to dream of having a Ferrari. And now he's got to the point where he can afford a Ferrari and he doesn't want one. He'll see one going down the street and that's really nice. I love that. If I wanted to, I could buy that. And just knowing that was enough for him. He doesn't need to impress anyone. Just the knowledge was enough for him. And that to me meant, oh, wow. When you get to that point, then you're not trying to impress anyone. So that's sort of, I suppose, a way of being rich.
Yeah, and actually, I was in the UK and I saw a friend who's kind of the opposite of this, in my
really?
opinion, where this friend has got themselves to a position where they have a certain level of spending that they need to do, and that's kind of locked them into a certain job, and they're not really saving because of this kind of expectation.
Right.
So yeah, like being able to live on very little is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You know, having
Isn't that how
option.
people like Mr. Money Moustache and stuff managed to retire early? They were very, very frugal for a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a high salary as well, which helped.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So he was a computer programmer, I think, or a computer
Oh, I
engineer.
see.
So he had a high salary, but after 10 years of having a high salary and not really spending it, then yeah, you do have a considerable nest egg. His hobby is doing up houses too, so I mean that doesn't hurt.
Oh,
My grandfather had that same hobby, and yeah, he did very well with that.
Yeah. Right, so I'm going to go back to our little top 5 list of his saying or his thoughts. The next one is, quotes, "The market is rational, but investors play different games, and those games look irrational to people playing a different game," which I read that as kind of when I'm looking at a particular stock going up to a crazy high valuation. It's like, why would people keep buying that? It's ridiculous. And is it Warren Buffett who says the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, or something like that? But he's saying the reason why it is irrational is because whoever keeps on buying that stuff is playing a different game to you. They're not like thinking about the long haul. They're thinking about the quick trade, or they're looking at a different set of metrics or whatever. So in that respect,
or they have a different portfolio allocation.
Oh, right. Yeah. It
you
could
know, they might have
tax,
their portfolio works differently, or different tax incentives. Like there's all sorts of stuff.
So in that respect, maybe it's not irrational. It's just they're playing. They've got a different sort of idea in their mind. So don't get stressed out about it. Basically, that's just the way it is.
Which leads to the point that it's really important for you to understand your goals and your game, what game you're playing, right? So if you don't understand that, it's quite easy to get sidetracked and start to think, oh, maybe I should buy gold now, because everyone's talking about gold, or maybe it's time to buy Japanese companies because Warren Buffett's buying Japanese companies, because you haven't got that center that keeps you
That's a good point.
On the right path.
Yeah, but they're probably playing a different game to you. The next one, position number 2 that I have, is every 5 to 7 years, people forget that recessions occur every 5 to 7 years. And this is basically saying that bubbles going to happen, busts are going to happen. And each time I see comments saying, oh, this time is different because of this and this and this. The same with the internet boom, the dot-com boom in the 2000s. Oh, this time is different because we never had the internet before. And, and then cryptocurrency comes around, and this time is different because it's the whole financial system. Maybe AI will be the same. AI boom.
Yeah. AI investing now.
yeah. But yeah, he says 5 to 7 years. And I did see, I can't remember, was it the Property Hub website? I think propertyhub.com or something. They're based in the UK. They've got this theory where the property over in the UK, at least, goes in 18-year cycles. And apparently there is some like reliable research going back over generations, showing this sort of tends to be this cycle. So again, I suppose the message from this is basically take a longer term view, take a broader view.
Oh yeah, and make sure that you're not in a position where that's going to damage you.
Oh yeah.
If you're buying stocks on margin and a stock market crash will destroy you, that's not a position you want to be in. So
right then, and then my top one of his is my top thought from his list, in my opinion, is average performance sustained for an above average period of time leads to extraordinary performance. And he says this is true not just in investing, but careers, relationships, and parenting. And then he has another thought, which is basically, I think, a summary of that. The fastest way to get rich is to go slow.
Yeah, makes so much sense. Yeah, I was looking at a bodybuilder the other day. They had a video, and they were like, "Yep." So you see these guys, they get really into it, and they go 120% for 2 months, and then they give up. And then you see the other guys, and they do 20% for decades, and who's got the results? It's the 20% guys for decades every time.
Yeah. Like investing, yeah. Oh, kind of like what we were saying with Shaney. Just stick it somewhere, don't think about it, and give it time.
Yeah, and consistency, just doing it month in, month out. And I found that 'cause I'm not particularly talented at investing. I've made lots of mistakes, but we have been investing consistently for about 15 years, and the results are there. So
Yeah.
we it's not if we'd done the right thing, we'd have made more money, but it doesn't matter because you've made enough money to meet your goals, which is again, what game are you playing? Are you playing the can I get as much money as possible, or are you playing the can I get enough money to fund the lifestyle I want?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because we're not playing the get as much money as possible game. It's a different game with different incentives and different strategy.
Yes.
Most individuals that's not what we're doing, right?
Right. I'm saying this is kind of leading into the next thing. Ramit Sethi's kind of philosophy is pretty similar to that. His question that he asked,
of course, yes.
The question he asks everybody is, "What is your rich life?" And then work out how to get there.
Yeah, I really like Ramit's stuff. Actually, I've been following him for a really long time, since before his book even.
All right. I'm going to get the link to put in the comments. But the reason why this is in the news is because just last month on Netflix, he had a series come out. I think it's 8 episodes, and it's called How to Get Rich, which it could have had a more less sort of like spammy kind of salesy title.
I think it's because his book is called "I Will Teach You to Be Rich," and it's just carrying on that theme, so it's familiar, maybe.
Yeah.
It's also kind of clickbaity. It's like people will be like, okay, let's see what rubbish he's going to say about that. So,
right. But would you class it as rubbish, Ben, having watched it?
No, I think it's really interesting because it's looking at real people and real situations. He's actually got a podcast that's the same, where he has a couple on every week or whatever, and talks to them about their. And it's always about much more than money. It's always about emotions and your kind of history and your, all that. And that's where the problems come from, right? Because people aren't even aware of where their kind of attitudes towards money come from.
Yeah.
So it's delving into that. Of course, the Netflix series is a bit over the top, I thought.
They are larger than life characters in the series, but that makes it sort of entertaining as well as educational, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes it's a lot like what's it called? Get Smart with Money, I think, is the similar series with Mr. Money Mustache on it as one of the coaches.
Oh, yeah.
And that's very similar. So you get these people in America, basically, where salaries are higher, people have a much higher kind of spending baseline, and from the outside you look at these people and you think, what are you doing? But it does make for good TV, I guess.
Yeah.
And the principles are universal, aren't they?
Yes. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all for everybody, because we all have different goals and we all start off in different places. Yeah. What I found interesting is whether the people would listen to him or not. And invariably, they eventually would sort of come around to his sort of way of looking at things. But some of them took a bit of persuading, and some of them straight away was like, yes, please, I'll do whatever you say, I need help. So
entertaining, potentially useful, definitely worth checking out if you have Netflix, I think.
Yes.
And then something slightly less happy.
Oh, yeah. What? Maybe we shouldn't have finished with this. So we're finishing the news with another recent news article. The government approves hike in household electricity rates. And so several now not all, according to the news article, but several electricity companies, including TEPCO, went to the government and said, please let us raise the price of electricity. Now, it's good, I suppose, that they can't just do it on their own. They do have to get government permission. And the other good thing is that the government did say no, not the amount of price hikes that you want to do, but yes, if the price hikes are a little bit lower. But the bad news is it's still going to be between 14 to 42% increases, according to this article, for the companies that requested that from the government. And that is, I'll read it out here: Hokkaido Electric Power, Tohoku, TEPCO, sorry, man, Hokuriku, Chugoku, Shikoku, and Okinawa.
That's
maybe other companies are
everyone
asking,
but Kansai, isn't it? Like Kansai's not on that list, right?
Kansai's not on there. No, Kyushu's not on there. Whether they're doing it like you've got a separate timeline, they're going to ask next month.
They've already done it, maybe. Because there was another one back in December, wasn't there? So
yes, I think so. Yeah.
The other thing is that when the companies put the prices up last time, the government introduced the subsidy at the same time, so it wasn't really as noticeable for consumers. So I'm curious about what's going to happen to that subsidy. So if it continues or if it's going to go away and then we get the double whammy. So we got the previous hike that we didn't notice and then a new hike. So it's going to be something to keep an eye on, I think. Especially if we have a super hot summer, which is what it's shaping up to be with El Nino starting up. And we're supposed to have more extreme climate over the next 3-4 years, maybe. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we might have a hot summer. So, obviously electricity and air conditioning is not optional if it's hot enough. It's actually, important for not dying in the summer.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Anyway, on that note, that's our news. Sorry,
basically, be aware that you might be paying a bit more in electricity, so make sure that that you've got that flexibility in your budget going forward.
Allow for that, yeah.
Well, so you might need a side hustle to help you pay for this.
Oh, really, Ben? Do we know anybody who could talk about side hustles?
Cool. But before that, you've managed to buy something again.
Did I?
So you
yes,
picked up your is it a Mook? It's a Mook, isn't it? Like the Live a Rich Life on 2 million yen Mook that I bought last year.
Yes. One of the
magazine book
magazines. Yes. Although this was just what was it? 990 yen, I think. So I was at with my relatives the other day. They don't have internet, so it's a very offline experience. So I go to the shop and buy a book to read. And they got this. This is Kabunushi Yutai, which is all about the sort of the gifts that you get if you buy shares directly in particular Japanese companies. Not all Japanese companies, but some Japanese companies. Only available if you're a resident in Japan, I think, and quite peculiar to Japan. And some of the things are Kuo card. I'm never sure how to pronounce it. Kuo Cardo, like 2,000 yen card that you can use in kombinis. Some of them might be catalog gift. So every year they'll send you a catalog and you choose if you want a box of apples or a stuffed toy or something like that. And some of them could just be discount vouchers, like 20% off their products or something like that. And I've got a few shares which give the Yutai, Kabunushi Yutai. I like it a lot. So I was interested to see, this only comes out once a year. This is from January. And so if you're keeping track of the prices daily of these companies to buy and sell, this is buy and sell daily. This is not for you. But if you're looking long term, then what? 5 months later, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. So I enjoy looking through this as seeing, what's changed, what, any good ones that I've overlooked here. Benesse was quite interesting, actually. I might get some Benesse shares because they've got a not bad, I think it's a catalog gift. But only for
you get cut price testing, or like you get to go to their juku for
right. But apparently they've stopped marketing one of their sort of like subscription test things for kids. The subscription numbers are going down partly because they just stopped marketing and they're going into nursing homes. So it seems like they're really thinking about the future and like the older population is going to be bigger than the child population. So yeah, it sort of, I don't know, I like this because the Kabanushi Yutai is just kind of the thing that triggers me to then look further into companies and, you know, help make a decision. The side benefit is also my wife was looking at through this. She has no interest in investing, but she was looking at it and thinking, oh, I can get a hotel voucher with this one. Oh, well, let's get something that we both can sort of have an interest in.
Yes. So the real value of Kabanushi Yutai, these shareholder gifts, is that they're understandable, I think, to the man in the street. You know, it's very obvious. You know, it's very, very clear. So if you buy this, we'll send you this specific present, you know, once a year. It's easy to understand. You're like, oh, okay, so I like McDonald's vouchers, or I like rice, you know. Like, whereas, you know, dividends and things, it's slightly more alien to a lot of people. So what's this percentage, and you know what's the, you know, you got the declaration date and then the payment date, and it's just like, what? So yeah, I mean, it's definitely encouraged normal people to buy shares, I think.
Yeah, I like the system. Yeah, as long as it's not your only measure of evaluating shares.
Yeah. I mean, so most people kind of advise looking at, you know, the combined dividend plus gift and that kind of thing. Often they'll do both, won't they? These companies. So you might get a 3% dividend, and then you get like a gift on top of that.
Yes, this magazine does that. Yeah, and there's a guy we've talked about him before, Mr. Kiritani. His name is there. Can you see that guy? He has a special feature in here. Right. So the media love him because I think he lives his life through these shareholder gifts because he has so many shares.
That's the story, isn't it? He doesn't spend any money. He just uses the gifts.
I was trying to work out how he does that. He must have a lot of shares in a lot of companies. How does he manage his portfolio? I have no idea. But he does have some good rules. Actually, maybe I'll just sort of read out his rules. And so he has 3, basically. The first rule is think about the fundamentals. So any share that he chooses, in addition to having a nice, the gift, the Yutai gift, it should have good value. And by that, he means a low PBR, price to book ratio. He suggests under 1, and the low price to earnings ratio, PE ratio, and he suggests under 15. I'd agree with both of those. His second rule is buy it when it's cheap. So there's this Yutai gift you really want, or the company you really like, just wait until it's cheap. Don't rush out and buy it. Sort of keep an eye on the price. And if it never gets cheap enough, just don't buy it. There'll always be something else. And that's a good rule. And his final rule is, to think about combining it with the dividend. So the sort of gift and the dividend combined, that's your overall sort of return, excluding any capital gains return. And the reason why he likes the gifts is because he says they are less likely to change compared to dividends. So the company can cut or raise dividends more than it's likely to change the gift system. That's his theory.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And also, it occurs to me that he must have quite a sizable income from the cash dividends.
He must have, yeah.
Even though he pretends to, live. I mean, he's got several 100 million yen's worth of shares, I believe. So his income just from the dividends must be fairly huge, comfortable.
Yeah, I would.
And then he's probably spending all that money on buying more shares, isn't he?
If he loves it so much, that's his.
If he's living off the gifts and then he's spending he's reinvesting all the dividends, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway,
to get more like rice and beer and whatever. Yeah. Cool. So our deep dive today is talking about side hustles, and we kind of thought about this because it seems very topical. Like lots of companies are changing their work rules to allow their employees to have side jobs. It seems traditionally this was a big no-no in Japan. So you work for the company and you're loyal and you don't do anything else. But with the changing economy, that seems to be changing culturally. So it's becoming more common for people with kind of good jobs to have side hustles, I guess. And real estate has always been an acceptable side hustle. So having commercial real estate on the side is fine. It's one of the few things you can actually use to deduct as a tax deduction from your income.
Yeah.
But this side job thing is new, and let's talk about it.
Yes, and we both have experience, I think, don't we, with the various things?
We do, yes. And before we talk about it, actually, we probably need to talk about visas.
Right.
Because in Japan, your visa, if you have a work visa, really does determine what kind of work you're allowed to do. And it's very important to be aware of that and hopefully to follow it. Because if you're working illegally, the worst case scenario is you will be deported and you will not be allowed to return to Japan for 10 years or something like that. So, if you have a house and family here, you don't want that to happen.
No.
So
basically,
obviously, if you're... Oh, go on.
Spouse visa or permanent resident, I guess, would be the only two? Or special visa?
There's those two. There's the long-term resident one, I think. There's a child of permit. But basically, all those kind of long-term ones where you're not restricted in terms of your employment, that's ideal. But if you have a work visa, if you're a specialist in humanities or you're an instructor, those are very, very specific and very, very limiting. And none of them allow you to work for yourself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you need to be employed by someone. So if you're, you want to start a business or something, then you need an entrepreneur visa, I think it's called, or a spouse or permanent resident or et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So really important to be super aware of your visa situation. Now, there's one thing you can do, which is you can get special permission to work outside of your visa.
Oh.
So if you're an instructor, for example, you're only allowed to work in public schools. But if you wanted to work for an Eikaiwa school, you could go to the immigration office and get permission to do that specific job that's not covered by your visa, and then you'd be okay. And in the same way, if you wanted to do translation work on the side, or if you wanted to work at Starbucks, you would have to get specific permission to do that particular job. And this is what students do. So students are not allowed to work, but it's very easy for them to get this special permission to do 20 hours a week or whatever. And then they can work on a student visa.
Okay. So basically speak to a lawyer or just go straight to the immigration office if you...
I think you don't really need a lawyer. It's a very, very straightforward process. But yeah, get some information probably online, and then go to the immigration office and do the paperwork so that you're not working illegally and you're not risking, being deported and barred from Japan. Then you'd be retiring somewhere else. You'd have to retire France instead of retire Japan. Yeah. And then tax is the other one. So obviously, if you are making money doing your side hustle, you should be paying tax on it, probably. So there is an exemption. So if you're working for a normal job and you're doing the end of year tax adjustment through your company, you're allowed to make up to 200,000 yen without declaring it. So you have this kind of miscellaneous side income exemption thing. So that's one thing. But if you make more than that, you do have to declare it. And at that point, you'd be declaring it as miscellaneous income.
Right.
And for miscellaneous income, you have your income and then you have your expenses. And you can deduct the expenses from that income, not from your other income. And then you can, it's actually really easy. I did it this year for my RetireJapan stuff. So I have a job working for my wife in her school. And then all the RetireJapan stuff, I kind of did my own books and submitted it as miscellaneous income. It's very, very easy to do.
Yeah. The only thing is the miscellaneous income is taxed higher, isn't it, than like a salary income as far as I know.
I think it's the same. It's just added on. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the tax rates are not the same. It's basically added to your income to get your total income, and then your tax is based on that. But because the deductions are quite generous in Japan, you can generally deduct quite a lot from that miscellaneous income. So you're not adding all that much on to the.
Oh, okay.
So the thing you might be thinking of is if you're doing part-time work, they will withhold like 10% automatically, and that might be more than the taxes you owe. But when you do your tax declaration, you get a refund for that. So.
Right. No, I was thinking of with cryptocurrency, for example. If you get money from, I think so, the cryptocurrency or consortium in Japan or wherever it is lobbying or has been trying to lobby the government to change the rules, because if you make income through shares, either capital gains or dividends, you pay a relatively low rate, like say 20%, I think, on dividends. But if you make money with cryptocurrency, you pay much more because it's classed as a miscellaneous income.
Yes, yes. So all that means is that they're taxing crypto as normal income, which, because it goes in bands.
Oh, I see.
Right. Whereas capital gains is always a flat 20%. So if you make 10 billion yen from crypto, the government's going to take 60 odd % of it because it's income. Whereas if it were capital gains, it would just be 20% across, no matter how much it was.
Right, that's it. And I think people are trying to get the government to change that, but I don't hold it. I don't expect that.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? I mean,
really?
To tax it as income.
No, I mean changing the band though from a flat rate to at least something that increases based on the
capital gains.
Or dividend income. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can't see that going down well.
No, because
with the wealthy
laws,
classes, yeah,
have probably got a lot of those themselves, and they're not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, I hope not. That would really screw up my retirement planning. But the new NISA should take care of a lot of that, because obviously with the new NISA, you're tax exempt completely. So
yes. Go to retirejapan.com/NISA
for more information. Awesome. All right. So now that we've covered visas and tax, make sure your visas and taxes are done properly. Let's talk about some side hustles. So I've had a second or third job the whole time I've been in Japan, at least from year 3, I think. Year 3, I started working part-time at an eikaiwa, and since then I've always had, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 little side things going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the first thing I did was...
What's your experience of that been?
Maybe about four or 5 years ago, I had an Etsy store, but I had to set it up in the UK because although you can set up an Etsy store from Japan, they are currently not set up to accept credit cards for sellers in Japan. The way it's linked up is that to accept payments as a Japanese or a seller based in Japan, it has to be furikomi, basically.
Oh God, no, thank you.
Yeah, and especially my audience people. I had as you can see, actually, I've got ukulele. This is not one of my designs, but I made various ukulele design T-shirts and tote bags and stuff like that for my sort of ukulele audience, and most of them were outside of Japan. It was all in English, and they want to pay by credit card. So I was fortunate because I have still got a bank account back in the UK, so I used that. But then it meant I had to declare that to the UK government. Although I didn't have to pay taxes in Japan and UK, I did have to declare it in the UK and then in Japan as well. And it was just a lot of hassle, and I wasn't making very much. So I just sort of cut it down after a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was my first. But since then, I'm dabbled in a couple of other things, which we can talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about specific side hustles then, because I think that's probably what people are going to be interested in.
Okay. Well, can I stick with the Etsy thing? Because this is kind of still ongoing in terms of, I see people talk about this on YouTube, especially with AI at the moment. There are lots of videos very recently about how you can make designs using AI, make a design in 5 minutes, put it on a T-shirt, sell it on Etsy, Redbubble, whatever like that, and then boom, make loads of money. And of course, they're all saying, the thousands of dollars a month, blah, blah, blah. I find that very hard to believe, having tried it myself. So I haven't tried doing AI designs. I did actually do the designs myself, which I'm not a designer. They weren't great, but it was something that I wanted to wear, and some other people did as well. But even so, even if you can get those things up, and I had it through print on demand, so I wasn't shipping things out myself, which was great. It was very hands off, but you're still dealing with customers, and people writing to you saying, "Oh, can you put a message in there, to Sharon, happy birthday," or whatever. Like, no, I can't. The system's not set up for that. And then somebody else will be, "Oh, I really need this to get this by Christmas and then next Wednesday. Can you tell me if that's possible?" Like, well, I don't know, because they say there's
I'm
a
not
delay.
shipping it.
Yeah, and then if I say yes, but it doesn't get there, what I do? I did have to give a couple of refunds a couple of times, and then the shipping as well was really high. On t-shirts, it wasn't so bad, but mugs especially, mugs would be like $7 to ship, which really makes the price sort of
You want to
really
sell it
difficult
for
to get
$7, don't you? I mean,
yeah. So then you would, and also you had to think about different parts of the world. I wanted to have free shipping for everybody, but shipping rates change for each country. So some countries you wouldn't really make a profit on. And then trying to calculate your profit on top of not just the platform fees, but then the sales taxes. So some states would have a sales tax. UK got 20% or something VAT. And so just working out what to charge to make a profit was really tough. And then in the end, I would get, say, $1 or $2 profit per item. And then, wow, I've really got to sell a lot of items to actually make anything
$10,000 a month.
Right, based on the time you need to put in. And it's not just designing something right at the beginning, it's a sort of follow-up after that, and the time for logging it to be able to submit that to pay your taxes at the end of the year. So you've got to think about a lot of things other than just, wow, I can make $20. And a lot of these YouTube videos, they're telling you the revenue. So yes, you can make $1,000 revenue, sure, but then the actual profit that you get after that is probably going to be what, $50, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's good, very low cost up front. So the good thing is you can give it a try, and see how it goes, but do not have high expectations, I think, from my experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I found something. So I write textbooks, so English teaching textbooks for Japanese junior high school students. And we started off printing them ourselves. So we found a printer. We got the printer to print the books. They'd send the books to us. We'd sell them to people and then ship the books to people and invoice the people and try and keep track of all that. And it's just a nightmare. Absolute nightmare, especially as a side business, because this wasn't, our main. We're not a publisher. So we switched to Amazon. So Amazon's got print in demand. It's very easy. You just go to the Kindle kind of website interface thing, and you can upload a PDF and set the price and click go, and then like a few days later they check it, and then it goes live on Amazon, and Amazon prints it, they ship it, they invoice it. They take 40%, I think. And then you pay the printing cost, and then you keep whatever's left.
Do you do that through the Japanese Amazon website? And does that mean you can sell worldwide, or is it only Japan?
Yeah. So you can choose which stores they go through. So yeah, you can sell them through all the Amazon stores.
So going through the Japanese Amazon, you can sell a physical book in America, for example.
Yeah, and you can set all the prices separately. So you can say the price in Japan is this, the price in the US is this, the price in India is this, and so on. Really granular kind of thing.
A link to that in the comment in a second as well.
Yeah, it's been really good. Obviously, we're not making as much money as we could if we went through a printer, because if you do a big print run, if you print 2,000 books or 5,000 books, then the price per copy goes quite low. Whereas Amazon, it's a flat. They take 40%, and then you pay the printing cost. But that means that you can sell one book, and it's not extortionate. So
yeah.
For a side business where you're just doing low volumes, or you don't want to deal with all the invoicing and shipping and stuff, and it's worked really well for us.
Oh yeah, so I've got a link here for Kindle Direct Publishing, but it seems like it's not just Kindle. You can also do paperback versions of your books there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the one. They have the one site, I guess, for both. So you do physical books and the Kindle ebooks. And for Kindle ebooks, they only take 20%, I think. And of course, there's no printing cost. So you make much higher margins on Kindle ebooks than you do on the physical books.
Oh. I've always wanted to write a book, and I didn't realize it would be that easy.
It's so easy. And the books are fairly decent quality, and they, you can buy them and they'll arrive the next day. So it's amazing. But they do take a big chunk compared to.
What about the marketing? Do you have an audience, or you have marketing that you have to do, or does enough come through just Amazon searches?
Oh, no. It's entirely market self. It's people know me, or I'm in lots of groups for school owners. So we promote it there, and people buy the course, and a lot of people like it, so they recommend it to people. And yeah, if you just put something on Amazon, you would sell zero.
Okay.
So I've got a couple of ebooks actually. I've got my miles and points ebook, and I think I've got one about teaching English in Japan. I don't remember. It was quite a long time ago. I made these Kindle books, but they've sold very, very little, even though I've got these platforms that mention them sometimes. So
right,
it's very competitive. Unless you've got an audience, I don't imagine it would. You'd have to be quite lucky to sell decent amounts, I think.
Right.
But it's the cost is zero, and it's kind of fun to do. So yeah, it's a fairly decent. You're just spending time basically.
Yeah, maybe it goes back to a little bit to what Shaney was saying about schools. It all depends on if the child, or what you were saying as well, if the child is suited to a boarding school or an international style of education or a Japanese style of education or whatever. So yeah, it depends on if you find writing fun, that's for you. But if you don't, then obviously it's not for you. You're
certainly not going to get rich doing this,
right?
Without being very lucky or very good.
Yeah. So I in preparation for this podcast, I was looking at lots of people reporting on how they'd done on YouTube. And one lady, she made a bunch of coloring books, and again using AI to make little black and white diagrams with color in. And she started making after 8 months, she started making maybe £300 or £400 a month. So what about 5 or 6 man, 50,000, 60,000 Japanese yen. But she had nearly 70 books on the platform. And so, yeah, it's only a handful of them that would actually sell. The rest would just be next to nothing. So you either get lucky or you make your own luck by churning out a whole load of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. It's this would be a low probability of making money, but low risk kind of option, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Except it's quite time consuming until you figure out how it works and how you make the PDFs and how you get covers designed and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That kind of ties in with the next things, which is I wanted to mention online courses. So it's kind of similar in that you're providing content for people. And so I've done this just recently, made a few video courses. I have 4 now. And I put them on Udemy and Skillshare. I started off on Skillshare because they have a very good sort of introductory hand-holding course for people who want to make a course. And that was great because it was motivation to actually get it finished, because it turned out to be harder than I expected. I didn't really do very well with my first course, but I kind of enjoyed it. And so then I made a second one, and that was much easier to make, and it's done much better. That's about ChatGPT and programming, because that's my background. And then I made another one. I just done my 4th one, which is about social media. So how to use Airtable to automatically post to social media. But the programming one with ChatGPT is still doing the best. And another one about web development. I thought that would be the best because my whole career is in web development. I know what I'm talking about, but no, it's kind of crickets with that one. So again, you don't know what's going to work.
I think being timely helps. Seizing
right.
the zeitgeist, and like everyone's talking about AI. So if you do a course on AI, it's like,
yeah. Well, there's a lot of competition now. I thought it would get lost in the noise, but no, there's enough people searching for it that it's okay. Having said that, on those 2 platforms, Skillshare and Udemy, the last month I made around $50 on both of them. And for the effort I put in, which is about a week for me to make a video course, it's really not worth it. Having said that, they're now just hopefully going to keep selling for, I don't know, months and hopefully years without me having to do anything. So maybe in the long term, it would be worth it. But again, it's not going to make me rich, but it's a nice little side hustle. And now I have 4. I can see which one has worked. So now I can sort of build that. I'm planning to do another one, again, ChatGPT based, which will hopefully be successful. So I'm starting to get some data in, which should make me a little bit more successful.
You can double down on the good ones, basically.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've found something similar with the guides. So the Retire Japan guides we self-published through Gumroad as ebooks. And yeah, like you said, it took a lot of time to write, but once you do it, then you can slowly sell them for years. Every month I sell a couple of copies of the guides. So again, it wasn't a wild success, but it's been fairly solid. You put in a lot of work at the beginning, and then hopefully you get this long tail of constant income coming in.
Yeah. Is it? Well, there's probably many books, but I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one in particular where he advocates for, if you want to be rich, have assets, basically assets that make you money. And yeah, I suppose it's all about building that up, isn't it?
Yeah, and the nice thing about digital assets is that they're basically very low cost or even free to create. And so you're just putting in your time and hopefully becoming more intelligent about how to allocate that time. But yeah, you're building up this portfolio of digital assets. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So other side hustles, which are not necessarily actually creating something, is so another one I have here is website affiliate links, website ads. So if you have a website or a blog or something, or I suppose YouTube channel maybe you can fit into this, then obviously you can put ads or affiliate links into that and generate income through that. And I do have this, one of my hobbies is watches. I collect vintage watches. I have a vintage watch site and I put eBay affiliate links on that. And my traffic is just over 20,000 visitors a month. And I get about $120 or so per month from eBay, which is
not bad.
It's not bad because I don't really need to do anything other than make sure the website is still, online and stuff. But building up that amount of traffic was quite a lot of work. I put in a lot of hours into it, and I've had other sites as well where I put in the same amount of time, and they just have not been anywhere near as successful. So I've been lucky with this particular topic. There hasn't been much sort of competition in that area. But I'm not going to retire on that anytime soon.
Yeah. So I mean, we have Amazon affiliate links on the, especially on the Monday Read, a little bit on the main site, and that makes basically there's this. You need to make I think 5,000 yen before they pay out,
right?
With Amazon affiliate, and we get that every couple of months, so it makes maybe 2,500 yen a month.
Yeah,
quite regularly. It's quite consistent. So obviously it's not gonna contribute all that much. It pays some of our hosting fees, which is nice, but
yeah.
And the other one is Wise. So I'm a huge fan of Wise, and we do have an affiliate link with them, and that's brought in nothing basically. I think most people that have Wise already, so they're not going to sign up for it through our link, and yeah, I love the product, but it's not really been a financial thing for us.
Yeah. Should mention as well with these, you do have to pay to have the website or the hosting, compared to publishing on Amazon, where it's all on their platform, so you don't have the monthly costs, do you?
Yeah. So you're paying hosting fees, and we have the email list that we have to pay for, Aweber. So that's like $30 a month, I think. So you do have these kind of fixed costs for having an online presence.
Yeah. YouTube income, we can't talk about that just yet.
No, because we're not monetized. Please watch all the Retire Japan videos, and then we might get monetized at some point. Basically, YouTube, there's a minimum thing for them to start giving you money, which didn't used to be the case. So I used to be monetized on YouTube because you could just be monetized immediately. And what that means is that when they show ads on your channel, you get a cut of the ads that they show. YouTube keeps most of it. They give the channel owner some of it. But now you need to reach a certain threshold before they start paying you. So until you reach that threshold, they keep all the ad money. And at the moment, you need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours in the last year, and that's a rolling count. So you know, as the days go on, you lose the older watch hours. So that's actually quite challenging for a lot of people because it's not cumulative. You can't just build up to it through effort. You need, within that calendar year, you need 4,000 hours, which is just over 12 hours a day, isn't it? I think.
I suppose so. Yeah, yes, it is actually. Yeah, because I'm about 6 or 7 on my channel, and about halfway.
Yeah, so you're never gonna get there if you don't have that 12 hours a day average kind of thing. So it's really quite challenging, I think.
Yeah.
I hope Retire Japan will get there within the next 3 or 4 months, but I'm not sure. Yeah. And then we can do a video about it. Yeah.
Yes, no, we certainly should. Yeah.
I got monetized on YouTube, and all I got was this 87 cents or whatever it was.
I'm kind of optimistic for that because, again, looking at other people's YouTube videos who have talked about this, it's very easy to find. I got monetized. Here's my first month paycheck. It really does depend on the topic, from what I've seen. And you've got, personal finance, which is one of the higher paying sort of ad revenue topics. And my guess is, I suppose at the moment all we can do is guess, but my sort of estimate based on what I've seen is between $5 to $10 per 1,000 views, I think.
Okay. And we get just over 4,000 views at the moment.
I think, yeah. Because it'll probably be a bit more than that by the time we eventually get monetized. I saw somebody who has a clothes making channel, and she was getting, I think, $1 to $2 per 1,000 views. So it does depend on your niche very much.
Yeah.
But it's quite easy to find other people who being open about how much they get to get a sort of rough yardstick. But
and hopefully at some point we'll be able to add to that data.
Hopefully.
Cool. Yeah. So YouTube's tough. YouTube is a grind, I think. And even the people that get lucky, they're actually working really, really hard. Most of them. I don't know anyone who got lucky with no effort. So.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. YouTube it's fun, and you just need to buy the equipment, which could be your smartphone and your laptop, your existing laptop, and you can use DaVinci, which is a free program for editing, which is really good. But yeah, huge time suck. So you got this huge investment of time that may or may not pay off, I think. Yeah. Would you say that's your experience with your watch channel as well?
Yes. I've really so far just made videos to sort of supplement the website without thinking about monetization of YouTube. And even sort of thinking about monetization, I should make more. I found one time I sort of made several in a row, and then my watch hours sort of went up, and then I sort of had a break, and then a couple of months later I went back and made like 3 or 4 in a row again, and it sort of went up but came back down again. Like, why not people like this? So I kind of I'll stick to focusing on the website because I know about that more than I do about YouTube. Or rather, that's where I want to put my time compared to YouTube. Yeah.
I think you've got more control. If it's your website, you have control of it. Whereas if it's on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, they can change the rules anytime, and you don't own anything. Basically, you're just kind of renting at that point.
Yeah. The only thing that's pushing me is actually I was logged out on a different computer or something, looked at my own channel, and there are adverts on my videos. Like, what? I didn't realize. I thought there wouldn't be adverts on there until you're monetized, but no, they're making money off it already. So, okay, I should be getting some of that.
Yeah, that's your money. It should be. Yeah. So,
another thing, if you have a YouTube channel, is you could try and get money through Patreon. I've not heard many positive things about this, unless you've got a big audience. I think it's quite tough, isn't it?
The tricky thing for me, because I have thought about this, and we do have something. We have a kind of sponsor thing through Gumroad where people pay $2 a month for nothing. They just do it to support Retire Japan, which is really great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But the tricky thing for me is what to provide, because Patreon is basically you're providing something to the people that support you. So they sponsor you and you give them something. So for me, it was always like, what would I give people, through this kind of monthly fee thing. So I think it's similar to Gumroad in that Patreon keeps 10% or something and you get the rest. I support a few people on Patreon at the moment, mostly cartoonists. Online cartoonists. And what they provide you is they either give you extra cartoons or they let you see them earlier.
Right. Yeah.
So you get them before they're released. And the main reason I'm doing it is because I like them. And obviously, being an online cartoonist is not the most stable job.
Yeah.
So unless they have a decent Patreon page, they're not going to be able to afford to continue making the cartoons, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know anyone making big numbers from Patreon. It's mainly like behind the scenes or, join me, as I look at something that isn't public.
Yeah. We've covered quite a few, all sort of in the digital realm, haven't we?
Yeah.
But there's opportunities sort of, more sort of physical goods or offline. And you've got more experience than me, I think, with these. We'll talk about that other one in a second. But the part-time English is the obvious one for anyone watching. You're in Japan. And I suppose this could be online or offline, couldn't it? But if you are a native English speaker or a very good English speaker, then there is still a lot of demand, I think, for English teachers here.
Yeah, there is. But at the same time, I get the feeling wages have come down.
Right.
While I've been here. So it used to be normal to get 3,000 or 4,000 yen an hour to teach part-time. And now it seems to be much lower. So I see ads for like 1,500 yen an hour, 2,000 yen an hour. And that's barely above minimum wage.
Yeah.
And that's not a huge amount of money. So, I mean, yeah, less attractive now for sure. And you need to be careful with the visa thing again. So if you're an instructor, this is really common. You're an ALT, you have an instructor visa. If you want to be doing this kind of Eikaiwa or, online kind of teaching, you need to have permission to do that because normally you'd need to have a specialist in humanities visa for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Even though they're both like kind of teaching.
Yeah. It's where you're teaching. So instructor visa, you can only teach in public schools or in community centers, government places. Specialist in humanity, you can only work for private enterprise. And then there's a lecturer visa, which is only working in university. So it's really specific.
Right. I see.
Yeah. Okay. If you think, I have an English teacher visa, I can teach English, that is very much not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Had no idea that was a thing, says Michael in the comments. Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
But so it does depend whether you've got a spouse visa, permanent visa, or not.
Yeah, if you have one of those visas, there's no worries in doing anything. Which ties into the next thing, actually.
Yeah. So what if I didn't want to teach English? I don't want to do anything online. I wanted to make money offline. What else could I do as a foreigner living in Japan?
Well, other than normal stuff like work in restaurants or, drive a taxi. And you can do this if you have the right visa and you have the Japanese language ability. But one other big one for male foreigners, especially foreign-looking foreigners like white or black and so on, is being a wedding celebrant.
A wedding celebrant.
Celebrant, yes. We don't call ourselves wedding priests. We are celebrants because it's basically a performance. In the
you say it sounds like you have some experience with this.
I did this for about 8 years. So I estimate I've done about 800 weddings in Japan.
Really?
Yeah, mostly in Sendai. So the chances of me running into one of my couples is quite high.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've got a blog post talking about this that we'll link to in the description.
Right, let me see that.
But yeah, at the time, it was a great job because the average pay per wedding was about 15,000 yen. One wedding takes 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, if you got a good job in a venue, so the venues are structured. So they have one chapel and like multiple dining rooms. So it's you can do weddings at half-hour intervals, basically. So you bring everyone into the chapel, do the 20-minute wedding, move everyone into the dining room, bring the next group into the chapel. So you could do 8 weddings a day.
Oh, I see.
Which is 120,000 yen, which is not bad as a part-time job if you're doing this, in season. So obviously the wedding seasons are in spring and autumn. Right. And then you have the lucky days, the Taiyan days, which are auspicious. And on those days, they're generally booked out. So you could do 8, 9, 10 weddings in one day, boom, and make really quite a lot of money. I was making more from weddings than my day job on big months. So,
wow.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
Again, wages seem to have come down because there's a lot more people in Japan now, I think. So I'm hearing it's more like 7,000 or 8,000 yen a job now.
Yeah.
And personally, I was so grateful to have this job because it helped me support my family. So I had quite a big family quite early. I had stepkids. So I'm not sure how we'd have made ends meet without the weddings, but at the same time, I was really happy to give them up because they were very much work for money for me. So I wasn't really, after you do a few, once you get to a couple of hundred, then you're not really learning anything anymore.
Right.
And they're very stressful. So
really?
Yeah, so because it's public and because it's being filmed, it's really high stakes. So you're performing and it has to be perfect because you only get one shot at it, right? It's their special day. You've got to get it right. Any kind of mistake, particularly if you get a name wrong, it's just whoo.
Did you mess up? Tell us some.
A couple, yeah. I mean, the worst one I did was I had a wedding in Matsushima, which is about 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
And I messed up the time. So an hour before the wedding, I got the confirmation phone call. Where are you? Are you about to arrive? And I was like, what are you talking about? So I jumped in the car and sprinted there, driving far too fast and stuff. Got there late, had to walk past the wedding party late.
Oh dear.
Didn't have time to do the rehearsal. And the problem is each venue has a different wedding script thing, so you have to memorize that particular one. Screwed that up as well, so the company lost that hotel contract, so it was incredibly messy.
That sounds pretty bad. Yeah, so we have a couple of comments about this in the YouTube chat. Michael has done this as well. He's done about 50, which I think is impressive. He says the pay really depended on the job, and it seems like the location as well. So he says he would get 50,000 yen for ones down in Soma. Now, maybe this is a while ago, I'm not sure. Sendai seemed to be the cheapest, hard luck, Ben, 9,000 to 12,000 yen. And then Hanamaki, Morioka were more around 15,000. So yeah, quite a difference then. And
I mean the rural ones basically you can only do one. You're going to a venue, you're doing one thing, and it's taking all day to get there on the train. So that's why the fees have to be a bit higher.
Okay, right. Cassie says she's surprised that people, I suppose it depends on sort of the culture or the religion you come from, but that couples are happy with having some random, this is Cassie saying this, some random white guy officiating one of the most important days of their lives. Yep.
Well, it's
surprised me at the beginning, but
there's a few things here. I mean, one is the wedding ceremony doesn't have any legal significance at all. So everyone gets married officially, legally at the ward office, and then they have a party, and lots of people opt for the Western style party, mainly because of I think it's because it's it's in the films, it's in movies. You get to dress up in nice clothes, and the celebrant is a very small part of that, I think. Although I did have to get ordained, so I am ordained through a church in the US. I can do weddings in 40 states in the US if I wanted to, because I have my thing. So it's iffy,
Yeah. Wow.
And also, like, if you're a religious person in Japan, you would get married at your church. You wouldn't be going to some random hotel. So not one person was a practicing Christian that I've married. Actually, the worst thing I had two really bad weddings in terms of that. One was I was working at an elementary school, and I moved to a different elementary school. So I transferred schools, and I had a wedding a few weeks later. And one of the people getting married was from the first school, and one was from the second school. And all the teachers from both schools came. So that was just like, oh my God.
They didn't know you had this side hustle.
Precisely.
That's a good point. Second one, side hustles. Like, how would you feel if your colleagues found out? Would you be cool or not?
Yeah. And the second one was one of my friends showed up, and I didn't know that I was going to be doing her wedding, and she didn't know that I was going to be doing her. And I was like, oh no. And she was really nice about it. She was like, yeah, I'm glad that, you did it and stuff. So it's like, but still, I was like, oh shit. So yeah, I'm quite glad that I don't need to do that anymore, but I'm very glad that I had that option when I did need it.
It sounds like a great experience.
Yeah, I should probably write a book about it. I've got lots of like happenings from the weddings. So,
but this is still, so you've stopped doing it now, but this is still a thing, I think, isn't it? It's still like a
very option. Much so. Although demographics, again, the number of weddings is really going down. And although I've heard that now there's a market for funerals, although much smaller, because obviously funerals are less kind of movies and aspirationals and stuff. But there are kind of funeral celebrants as well. Although most of the time you're going to go through your local tera, aren't you? I guess.
Yeah. And earlier on you said it's a bit iffy, but you mean iffy in the possibly religious sense. It's not iffy legally, is it? It's all legally absolutely fine.
Well, here we have the visa thing. So you need to be a permanent resident or a spouse, or you need to be on a missionary visa, which allows you to do religious activities.
That's a thing. I didn't know that.
And I'm not sure it's going to be very easy to get permission from immigration to do this as a side job, but I don't know again. So
that's true. Yeah. Wow. There you go. You won't hear about that in other YouTube videos about side hustles.
Maybe I should make a YouTube video about this. That is,
I think you should. Yes. Well, Cassie says that would be a fun book. I think at the very least, a YouTube video about it would be very good. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So don't be surprised in the next couple of weeks when.
Michael has said that he was asked to speak Japanese not so well. Apparently, I guess they want a more authentic, like foreigner.
Yeah, they want the katagoto experience. I never did that. I refuse to do that. I'm sorry. Right. There is a limit. So I did my best for people to make it a special day and put effort into it. But I'm not going to do the dancing monkey thing. Like, nah.
Right. Wow. What an experience.
And actually, one extra thing that I really got out of it was it's a great way to learn formal Japanese. Because the script is quite a formal register, and you have to memorize it. So I learned so much grammar from doing weddings as well.
You got to memorize the whole thing. I see.
Well, I mean, you can hold it, but
you got to say with confidence.
Who wants to be, like this the whole thing? So yeah, I memorized it, and then I had the script printed out as backup, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Very interesting topic that is. That's all new to me. We'll go back to the other side hustles then. We've got a couple to finish off with. And I suppose these are kind of relevant for any country, but in Japan, you can do Airbnb, although they have sort of tried to make that a bit tougher.
It's quite licensed here, but it is possible. So you've got the option to do, a room in your home. That's one thing on
Some friends
Airbnb,
might
and,
do
and
that.
I think they're going back to that. Like Airbnb have a
Oh,
new kind of product with hosts
yeah.
in their home, and they're already pushing that at the moment. And the other one, of course, is just doing it in a separate building, which is
Yeah.
more commercial, I think. But
Yes.
Japan's quite restrictive, so I think you can only do 6 months a year, I believe.
If you're not like officially registered as a full-time Airbnb, like you jump to all the hoops and get a special license, I think. Yeah, if you haven't got that, then you can only do 180 or something-ish days per year.
Okay. There's a few people on the forum that do it, I think, on Retire
okay.
Japan. So it's definitely, if you're interested, jump on there and ask a question, and we'll probably have some advice as well.
Maybe I need to buy an Akia and start an Airbnb experience, says Michael in the chat. Well, yeah. So we talked about both Akia and Airbnb in a recent one of these podcasts where we covered property, and so it's worth listening to that. But yeah, even Akia, which they're often free or low cost, but because they're in a bad location or something, so even just getting the Akia might not be very cheap.
Yeah, it's going to be other tourists coming to wherever it is.
Yeah. But we've got a friend down in Kochi Prefecture in Shikoku, and they rent a room out Airbnb, and they really enjoy it. They enjoy the social aspect of it. I think you have to enjoy that as well. Meeting different people, traveling and coming to visit them, and so yeah, it's the money they gain from that. But in addition, it's there's a non-monetary building those relationships and hearing stories and things.
My friend did it in London. Like he rented out a room in his flat. But he stopped doing that after a year or so. He had lots of bad experiences with guests. So it's not necessarily going to be good or bad. It's going to vary, I think.
Yeah. The final one I have on the list is buying and selling on Mercari or Yahoo Auction. Again, if you're outside Japan, it'd be the same as selling stuff on eBay or whatever. And I've done this a little bit, but not really as a sort of a side hustle to make loads of money. It's just things that I don't need anymore, I will sell. So I talked about watches earlier. I do like buying watches, and then I'll wear it, and then after a few weeks or months I'll move it on and go and buy another one. And yeah, sometimes I make a bit of money, although it's very, very easy to forget about the two main costs, which are the shipping, and you either cover the shipping costs yourself, which I do, and I say I've got free shipping, which means I think maybe I get slightly higher bids because of that. And then there's the fee which Mercari or Yahoo Auction would take, which is about 10%.
Yeah.
And then if you want your money from Yahoo Auction in particular, if you want that through PayPay, it's free. But if you want it through a bank transfer, you then have to pay, I think, 200 yen or something.
Right.
So yeah, take that all into account, and then like, oh wow, I sold it for 20,000 yen. Well, you didn't. You sold it for 1,800. 18,000. No, what am I saying? Ichimahasen yen, whatever that is.
Yeah, 18,000, and then you had to pay the shipping costs out of that as well, didn't you? So
yes, yeah, which you have to kind of think about in advance to set your base price. So sometimes I'll start it at 1 yen, but then I've got to like cross my fingers and hope that it goes above 700 yen or whatever to cover my Yamato shipping costs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it's pretty good. I would say my advice for that, based on my own experience, is take a lot of photos, really, really clear photos if you can. And then what has worked for me is having a description and then a sort of list of the specifications. So with a watch, going back to a watch, people want to know stuff like this: the material, is it a leather strap or a metal strap? And all this is in the photos, but any text you're going to put in is going to be picked up by people doing searches. So I think it's worth putting it in there. And then I will put that as a written description and then list it out in bullet points as well, because I know some people won't read the description. They'll just skip to the bullet points. So yeah, putting like much more information than you actually need. On the flip side, if you want to buy stuff to then flip and sell at a profit, I think it's really good to look for stuff that is non-specific. So I like Seiko watches. Instead of searching for Seiko and a particular model number, I'll just search for Seiko old, Seiko Vintage or Seiko Diver, and I'll try and hopefully find somebody who doesn't know much about watches, and they've just taken one photo with their phone and they put it on and said old Seiko watch. I don't know what it is, and that means people searching for the particular model will not find it in their search results. Right, and that's worked for me a few times. Yeah. So
how much work is involved though? Because I have this image that it's a real hassle doing this, right? So you're taking photos and writing descriptions and putting things in boxes and going to the post office, and is that not the case?
Not too bad. It's much better recently with the posting actually, because convenience stores have automated a lot of that. So let's say I've got a good example here is actually with going back to the Kabunushi Yutai, JAL. Actually, I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know. That might be against their terms of service, so I wouldn't know about
something.
That.
A product.
I'll stick with watches. So I have a watch, and it's not too bad. I will take photos. I used to do it with a proper camera and tripod, but recently it's a bit of a hassle. So there's no rules on it. If you just want to take one photo with your phone, you can if you want to, but you're going to get a lower price. So it's a little bit flexible like that. So I would take all photos against a piece of white paper. Make sure I do it in daylight rather than nighttime, because the natural light just makes everything look better, I think. Then I would have to measure the dimensions and stuff. And the first time I'm thinking about how to phrase this and all that kind of stuff. But once you've done it once, I then save that as a file, and then I can copy and paste it and just fill in the details for the next model. So it takes quite a bit of time the first time, but after that, you reuse your past description as a template, and that works well for me. The actual shipping is now much better, and I will. You have to specify how you're going to ship it when you actually list it, and so I go. But you can put multiple. So I'll say I'll either send it with the post office. I can't remember what the name of something you pack it or something like that, or the convenience store equivalent. And then when somebody buys it, I'll put it in a cardboard box, which is usually a reused Amazon box that I've got lying around. Make sure you wrap it really nicely. I tend to put in a little note just saying thank you in Japanese. I'm just hoping that they won't give me a bad review, basically. So everything you can to avoid getting a bad review. And then I used to have to go to the post office and wait in the queue, and that was a hassle. But now you can go to the convenience store, you go to the machine, Yahoo Auction will give you this barcode. So with that on your
nice.
You then scan it on the Loppy machine or whatever the equivalent is at the convenience store. It'll then give you this ticket. And it used to be that you had to take that to the counter, and then they would enter it in the system. But now with things that are less than 3 centimeters thick, you don't even need to go to the counter. They've got this sort of post box thing inside the convenience store. It prints out this label, you stick it in, and you put it in the box, and
nice.
You're back home in 5 minutes, and it's really, really good. And when they do that, it automatically sends a message back to Yahoo Auction saying they'd posted it, and so the buyer gets notified automatically.
Nice.
It really has been streamlined very nicely. I think Mercari is the same, but nobody's bought any of my stuff on Mercari. I think I have it priced too high. So
my daughter does Mercari sometimes, not as a business, just to get rid of stuff. But I don't know the basically, when I've got stuff, I just give it to her, and then she sells it, and she can keep the money. I don't care. I just want to get rid of the thing at that point.
Right. Yeah. The posting part, it really is so much easier now. It's very nice. I mean, it is all in Japanese, so you have to be comfortable reading Japanese. But yeah, I sell something that you have to wait for them to pay before Yahoo Auction will actually give you that sort of barcode, that QR code. But once they do that,
okay, right,
yeah, take your package, take your QR code, go to the convenience store, and boom, you're done.
Nice,
really, really, yeah, it's good. I think it's like some of the other things we talked about. You don't need money up front, so it's worth giving it a try once or twice and seeing if it's for you or not. But you're probably not going to be rich from it once they've taken out all the fees and stuff.
Right, yeah. You can't really scale it very easily, can you? It's not like you could do hundreds a week suddenly, Like...
No.
Okay, so I think that's a fairly broad range of side hustles. If anyone's got any different ones, please stick them in the comments. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is probably going to be one of our longest
Oh, yeah, we're at 2.5 hours.
RJTVs
Wow.
ever. Let's just go through the forum shorts super quick. So these are basically interesting threads on the forum that have been active recently. And the first one was talking about bond allocations. So within your portfolio, you might want to have some stocks for growth and some bonds for stability. And, do we need bonds now? Is it a good idea to buy bonds now? Bonds seem to be a terrible investment. And there's a really nice discussion about that on the forum. So check it out if you're interested. Next one was selling an inherited house. And this was really shocking to almost everyone. Because you might assume that if you inherit a house and pay inheritance tax, you could then sell the house and not pay tax. However, that is not the case. So you inherit the house, you pay inheritance tax or not, based on how much it's valued at by the government. Right. But when you sell the house, you will have to calculate your capital gain. And the capital gain is based on purchase price by
paid anything.
Your grandfather or whoever bought the house.
Oh, when they bought it. Oh, I see. Oh.
And of course, there's depreciation and blah, 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 and you have to work it. But you do have to do this. And then you may or may not have to pay capital gains tax on that as well. And this was shocking for most people because a lot of countries handle this. When you inherit the house, you reset the price, and that's your kind of purchase price. So especially for houses overseas, where it might have been bought for £25,000 in 1970 and now it's worth £800,000.
Right.
That's going to be a painful conversation. So this was a really interesting thread and definitely worth checking out if you're in that situation.
You've got to hope they bought it during the bubble era at a really high price.
Right. Or you better hope that you've got a lot of cash to pay these capital gains taxes.
Wow.
And then the next one was about children's taxable accounts. So obviously Junior NISA is ending this year. So at the moment, Junior NISA is a great way to invest for children. But from next year, we're not going to have Junior NISA. So we're just going to have taxable accounts. So is it worth using a taxable account? When would it be a good idea to use a taxable account? Things like that. If you've got kids and you want to put some money away for them, check out that thread as well.
Yeah, that's good.
We had one about car navigation systems, particularly for older cars. So, when you buy the car, the navigation system data is up to date, hopefully. But a few years later, that information is going to be out of date. And often you have to pay quite a lot of money to get the latest data. We did ours a couple of years ago because it was about 10 years old. And basically all the roads had changed. I think we paid something like 20 or 30,000 yen to Toyota to update the data. So it can be very, very pricey to do that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got alternatives like using your smartphone or sticking an old iPad in there and using that. So that's an interesting thread as well. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Then we had a thread about moving abroad. If you're planning to come back to Japan. So you leave Japan for a few years, work abroad, and then come back. So what's your tax obligation? How does residence work? Lots of good information in there. We had a thread, well, it's an old thread, but it's about interactive brokers and how everyone in Japan is going to have to move to their new Japan system, even if they were in the US system. And basically, it's been delayed, and lots of people haven't been moved yet, and we don't really know what's going on. So, that's that. But if you've got an account and you're not sure what's going on, that might be a good thread to check out.
Yeah.
We had a thread about opening the new NISA account with a different broker. So, say you wanted to diversify. All your investments are with one broker, but the new NISA system is starting next year. It might be a good move to open your new NISA with a separate broker, make all the new investments over there, and then you've got two brokers and you've got a little bit of diversification and safety, if your account gets hacked or if the broker has an issue or something. So very paranoid people might want to check that out.
Yeah, I'm on the keep it simple. I'm happy with just one personally, but it depends on your appetite.
Yeah, I'm actually planning to switch. So I've got all my current investments with Rakuten. But in the new, we're going to put how much is it? 18 million. Yeah, we're going to put 18 million yen into the new NISA. So I'm going to put that in Monex, just so I've got that diversification a little bit.
Yeah.
We had a thread about planning for child expenses, which tied in very nicely to today's discussion about international schools. And then we got
that forced me to get a different job. Actually, we knew we wanted to send our child to an international school, and so I suppose at least a year before he was due to start, it was like, let's be realistic about this. We can't afford it on my current salary, and so forced me to find a new job with a higher salary to be able to afford it. Luckily, was able to get one.
The right direction.
Yeah, it's kind of like a forcing function, really, which was a good thing in the end. But yeah.
And then the final one, again, this is quite an old thread, but it's basically what jobs people do who are forum members. So we've got the usual kind of English teachers and IT guys and people working in Tokyo, but there's a whole bunch of other jobs as well. We've got like medical researchers and like advertising people and people that do inbound tourism and all sorts on there. So it's really interesting to read.
That sounds good.
I would check that one out too.
A lot of topics, isn't it, for this time?
Yeah, we've had a few. I mean, we do have hundreds of topics on the forum. So anything that you're interested in about retired, Japan and personal finance, our forum is a good place to go. And you don't need an account to read it. So you can go in and search for stuff and check stuff out. And you only need to register if you want to post in the forum.
Right. What would the URL be if people wanted to see the Retire Japan forums?
Well, they'd go to retirejapan.com and then they would click on the forum button. So
sounds very easy.
Cool. And I think that brings us to the end of this episode. 2 hours, 41 minutes. That's pretty impressive. Yes. And it flew by. So these things are so fun to do, for me at least.
Yeah. Wow, we've had some good comments as well. I really appreciate all the people leaving comments on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn.
It's amazing, isn't it? We're actually getting comments from all these different places. It's very, very smooth. Really impressed.
Yeah,
with the platform.
People's experience and excellent. Good. Whew.
Indeed. So I'm really hungry. It's time for lunch.
Oh, right. Yes, because you're not in Japan at the moment. So retire outside Japan until next week.
Yeah. Well, retire in Japan and then you have time to, go and see your family in Europe. So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Nice. Good. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us for this long. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. And see you next month on June 26th when, fingers crossed, we'll be talking to an accountant and CPA who is familiar with both US and Japanese tax systems. We'll be taking some questions. I'm not sure how, to what kind of depth we can go on that one, but yeah, come and join us next month for Retire Japan TV.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.